Chapter 198. Wow, old Jiang, it seems that you are really rich. Planes, 2 planes. Standing in the square of this aviation city and looking at the 2 planes that Jiang Hai is negotiating, Fu Yuan's eyes have been shining. On these 2 planes, he touched left and right and his eyes were about to spurt blood. Hey, can I take this thing back in a while? Although your car is also very good, I still want to take a plane, a private plane. After taking a few photos with the plane, Fu Yuan said with a serious face. This plane hasn't been adjusted yet. I can't let you take it. This helicopter can't be used either. You have to be honest and accompany me in the car. To be honest, Jiang Hai also wants to fly a helicopter back, but the problem is that he doesn't know how to fly it. And when the helicopter is brought back, the first flight naturally needs to be driven by the other party's crew. If something happens, he will be the first to die. As for the person who will sit with him, it is Marin Rupert. When he gets on the plane, he can better observe the plane and it will be easier for him to drive it in the future. So Jiang Hai directly cut off Fu Yuan's telepathic image. After receiving the helicopter, he watched Marin Rupert and the other party's crew take off, and then Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson left with the reluctant Fu Yuan. I say, this is New York. You don't take me to play here. I only have 10 days of vacation. Lying in the co-pilot seat, Fu Yuan looked at the street scene of New York in the United States outside the window and couldn't help but say with some dissatisfaction. Jiang Hai is too shameless. He won't even take him to play in New York. You came at the wrong time. Recently, the manor may have been targeted. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if I accompany you to play here for a few days. But for our safety, it's better to go back to the manor first. And most importantly, I'm not familiar with this place. I'll take you here to play in a few days when there is nothing to do. Hearing his friend's words, Jiang Hai also said with a little apology. What's wrong? Who did you provoke? Don't tell me it's the American Grey Gang. I've seen it on TV. Those Grey Gangs kill people without batting an eyelid. As soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan immediately turned his head and asked Jiang Hai with a face full of interest. Well, Jiang Hai and his buddies, in general, none of them had a normal brain. When other people heard that they had provoked the Grey Society, they would be a little worried, but Fu Yuan seemed to be more excited than worried. Yes, killing without batting an eyelid. Hee, do you think you're watching a movie? America is also a legal society, okay? Rolling his eyes at Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his head. Sometimes, even he didn't know what this guy was thinking. Fine. You said you wouldn't let me take a plane, you wouldn't let me play in New York, and you even dragged me into your war with the Grey Gang. I don't have any complaints, but there's only one thing. Did you help me find a girl? While counting his fingers, Fu Yuan muttered in a low voice. Of course, his so-called muttering was clearly heard by Jiang Hai. Girl? When he heard Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai almost hit his head on the steering wheel. What the hell is this? Yeah, you can't drag me into your incident and not give me any benefits. I'm still a virgin. Fu Yuan looked at Jiang Hai with a serious expression on his face. You're an animal. You think I don't know? You didn't have a girlfriend in university? Don't go to the little pink lamp below your house. How dare you? While driving, Jiang Hai still freed one of his hands and gave Fu Yuan the middle finger with a look of disdain. It's said that men have 4 irons. They went through the window together, went to the countryside together, carried guns together, and did that together. Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan were classmates, that was for sure. They didn't go to the countryside, and they didn't go to the army. However, they did do that together. The world is as black as the crows. Who doesn't know each other's background? If you pretend to be innocent, you will be struck by thunder. Ahem, I went to save women. Usually, after I went in, would chat with them and tell them that it's not good to do that. As for my previous girlfriends, I'm not sure if I'll become their husband. If I did that with them, it's not fair to them. *CK, just say that you're not prepared. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, after Fu Yuan talked for a long time, he guessed that he couldn't make up any more stories. He could only break the pot. No, I'll tell you. There are 10 girls in my manor who don't have an owner. 2 of them are my daughters, and the other 8 are my employees. Don't you have any crooked thoughts? Looking at Fu Yuan's shameless face, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. *CK, 10. Their bodies are not bad. The next time I come, will I come to collect your corpse and your daughters? When he heard Jiang Hai's words, the wretched expression on Fu Yuan's face became even more outrageous. Resisting the urge to punch him out, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth and said to him, "In the future, you should watch less movies with 2 or 3 people. Especially the romantic idol dramas produced by Japan. It's really not good for you. I know, it hurts the kidneys. But your brother's kidneys are indestructible." Patting Jiang Hai's shoulder, Fu Yuan interrupted him and said proudly. At the same time, he patted his back. "Whether it hurts your kidneys or not, I'm not interested to know. It's just waste paper. Now, most of the paper used is wood. If you waste paper, there will be fewer and fewer trees. The world will slowly warm up. At that time, you will be the real culprit of the destruction of mankind." Casually waving his hand, Jiang Hai looked at Fu Yuan and said lightly. Whether his kidneys were good or not, what did it have to do with him? *CK, your hat is getting better and better. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also laughed. The conversation between the 2 people was all joking and couldn't be taken seriously, but Ai Dehua, who was sitting in the back row, was a little depressed. Because these 2 people were talking in Chinese, he couldn't understand. After talking for a long time, he had nothing to do except to be in a daze at the back. But fortunately, this section of the road was not particularly difficult to drive. Not long after, everyone arrived in Boston. After another half an hour, everyone returned to Jiang Hai's manor. When Jiang Hai's car stopped in front of the villa, the 2 big dogs had already appeared beside the car, looking at the people in the car with longing. When Fu Yuan saw the 2 dogs, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Fu Yuan is also a dog lover. He used to raise dogs, but he raised them for more than 10 years. In the end, the dog died, and he was very sad. Since then, he hadn't raised them, but now that he saw Jiang Hai's dogs, he was still very interested. But when he got down from the passenger seat, besides being interested, he was also a little afraid. The F-750 was very tall, especially on the passenger side. When he looked at the 2 dogs in the car, although they were big, they weren't particularly big. They were about the same size as the ones he used to raise. But when he got down, he realized that something was wrong. The 2 dogs were lying on the ground, and their heads were about to reach his chest. The Caucasian Mastiff and Green Wolf Mastiff were originally large dogs. Coupled with the stimulation of Jiang Hai's blood, they had undergone a second growth spurt. After these days of improvement and good food and drink, the size of these 2 dogs had changed once again. Now, the Green Wolf Mastiff was more than 1.9 meters tall when it stood up, and the Caucasus had grown to more than 2 meters. When it stood up, it was already taller than Jiang Hai by a head, not to mention Fu Yuan, who was only 1.7 meters tall. When the 2 dogs came over, their heads were about to reach his chest. When he saw these 2 huge beasts, he couldn't help but take a step back subconsciously. He looked at these 2 fellows with some hesitation. One was black, and the other was green. They looked really scary. Okay, this is my friend. He'll be staying here for a few days. Don't bully him. Okay, go back. Fortunately, at this time, Jiang Hai also jumped down from the back seat, patted the 2 dogs' heads, and casually instructed them. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, the 2 big dogs curiously went forward and sniffed Fu Yuan, then left eagerly. Looking at the backs of the 2 dogs leaving, Fu Yuan couldn't help but lick his lips. Hey, I say, this dog of yours, any one of them will do. Remember to leave one for me when you give birth. Pointing at Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai, Fu Yuan's eyes lit up. He really cared about these two dogs. I don't have the intention to pair them up yet. But even if I do, how are you going to take them back? Scratching his head, Jiang Hai asked curiously. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan glanced at him. I'd rather spend money on quarantine. These dogs are really beautiful. It could be seen that Fu Yuan was really a dog lover. Such a dog was really worth a lot in China. Of course, if a person really liked dogs, they would not associate dogs with money. Compared to Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai was much more rational. He wasn't a dog fan. He also ate dog meat, and he wouldn't refuse something as delicious as dog meat. He raised dogs to relieve boredom and to guard the house. If he were to raise them as pets, he wouldn't pick these two dogs that weren't cute at all. Compared to these two guys, Dai Teeth and Chirp, Chirp was still a baby, so they were more like pets. No matter how he looked at it, these two guys didn't match well with pets. After bidding farewell to Edouard Anderson, Jiang Hai took Fu Yuan back to his villa. While walking, he also talked about their itinerary for the next few days. They would rest for the day and have a steak dinner in the evening. There was also a lobster and a few abalones in the freezer, which was enough for him to enjoy. Then, they would go horseback riding tomorrow, fishing on a boat the day after that, and playing with guns the day after that. In any case, in Jiang Hai's manner, he was a relatively idle person. Playing with his friends wasn't a big deal. Chapter 199. Horseback riding, fishing, playing with guns. Although I am very interested, there are still no girls. Listening to Jiang Hai's arrangements for the next few days, Fu Yuan walked and said with a smile. Of course, his words can't be serious. Stop talking nonsense, endure it, wait until you go back and find your little pink lamp to solve it. Glancing at him contemptuously, Jiang Hai then said. Then he opened the door of the villa and led Fu Yuan in. But as soon as the two came in, they saw Daliana and Marian sitting in the living room watching TV. The two girls also knew that there would be guests today, so they got up early and cleaned up the house. Although Jiang Hai's villa was not spotless, it was still very clean and tidy. The two girls also changed into decent clothes. They wore a pure white chiffon shirt with an autumn shirt underneath, which outlined their well-developed figure. Jiang Hai's face was very pale. Jiang Hai's face was pale, but he didn't know what to say. They were wearing denim shorts, but it was only about an inch above the knee. It was not hot pants. Jiang Hai could not let them wear that. They were wearing knee-length black stockings, and their long hair was straight and draped behind their heads. Sitting there, they were indeed very beautiful. They were two perfect big Lolas. Although it is still ice and snow outside, Jiang Hai's home is very warm, so it doesn't matter if they dress like this. After seeing the arrival of Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan, the two girls jumped off the sofa and ran over with a sweet smile on their faces. Cough, what's the situation? Looking at the two big girls running over, Fu Yuan, who had been clamoring for girls, was scared when he saw the girls this time. He looked at Jiang Hai with a puzzled face and asked. These are my two daughters, this is Daliana, this is Marian. Shrugging, looking at Fu Yuan's embarrassing appearance, Jiang Hai casually put on slippers, then threw Fu Yuan's bag on the sofa next to him, then hugged the two girls and said proudly. Although when Jiang Hai took in these two girls, he was a bit of a saint, then he especially despised himself and regretted it, but then he thought about it later. Now that sunbathing is so popular, then he can also do it occasionally. Fu Yuan is the first person who saw him sunbathing, and now it seems that the effect is still very good. Looking at the two girls with big curious eyes staring at him, Fu Yuan felt that his throat was dry all of a sudden. He opened his mouth and spoke to the two girls in his strange spoken language that he almost only spoke in English class. Although some of the pronunciation and grammar may be a bit strange, and the two girls can't quite understand, At least they understand what he means. So the two girls smiled sweetly and made some gestures to him, meaning that they are also very happy to see him. What does this mean? Looking at the two girls, Fu Yuan asked with some confusion. They can't speak, but they can listen. This is sign language, which means that they are also very happy to see you. After all, Jiang Hai has been in contact with these two girls for so long, some of the less complicated sign language can also be seen by him. Oh, so that's how it is. What a pity. Such beautiful little girls. TSK, by the way, here are 2 red envelopes. It's Chinese New Year, good luck, $500 each. It's not much. You didn't tell me about these 2 little girls. I only know that you adopted 2 children. Buy whatever the children want to eat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan sighed. 2 such beautiful girls can't speak. This may be God's punishment for them being too beautiful. Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered that he also prepared red packets. He casually took out 2 red packets from his pocket. While talking, he stuffed the money into the hands of the 2 girls. This scared the 2 girls. While pushing their hands, they retreated to Jiang Hai's side and looked at this wretched uncle with vigilance. F***CK, stop. Seeing that Fu Yuan was about to chase after them, Jiang Hai had no choice but to ask him to stop. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he explained that in the United States, there was no such thing as giving money. Even if it was a gift, it wasn't directly given money. Most of the time, it was something valuable. If the person didn't want it, then they could sell it. But no one gives money directly. There is no red packet during Chinese New Year, such as Christmas. Families will give each other gifts, but no one will give money. Therefore, Westerners are very hypocritical. While shouting about capitalism and making money all over the world, they avoid people who come to give money. On the other hand, Huaxia's words are said to worship money. The difference between the East and the West is really big. But I didn't bring a gift. You just said that I should have bought it when I was in New York and Boston. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Fu Yuan was a little dumbfounded. $1,000 is not a small amount for him. This is more than 6,000 yuan. His year-end bonus is in this. It is not a lot. From this, it can be seen that he really thinks highly of Jiang Hai. If it is in China, generally speaking, only the children of very close relatives will give 500 yuan. But in the United States, it is naturally impossible to give money, so he gritted his teeth and exchanged it for $3,000 in China. This is almost 20,000 yuan. 1,000 of it is going to be given to Jiang Hai's 2 children as red packet money. But he didn't expect that he can't give it to them in the United States. Okay, it's enough as long as you understand. Jiang Hai smiled. He can't say in New York that you are buying gifts for my children, right? That is too shameless. Moreover, Jiang Hai didn't care about these things. How can I do that? Oh right, I still have this. Although it is not worth much, I will give it to you. No matter what, it is a gift I brought from China. Just as Fu Yuan was scratching his head anxiously, he suddenly remembered something. After opening his backpack, Jiang Hai took out 2 small bags from it. Jiang Hai looked inside and found that it turned out to be 2 commemorative medals of the great ancestor. This thing was extremely enviable in this special period. But now, in the imperial capital, it was more of a souvenir. For example, the commemorative medallions of Taizu and the commemorative medallions of the 10 founding generals were sold in the streets of the imperial capital, and the price was not considered expensive. Of course, the commemorative medals of that special period are expensive. But now, these are all imitation medals, so they are not expensive. After Delina and Marian took the commemorative medals from Fu Yuan, they looked at them carefully. Compared to the red packet, they are obviously more interested in this thing, so they smiled and thanked Fu Yuan, then went upstairs to play. Sigh, I am envious of your life. Looking at the backs of the 2 little girls leaving, Fu Yuan began to be wretched again. You can't keep anything serious in your head. Let's go upstairs and arrange a place for you to stay. After patting Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai took him upstairs and found an empty room for him to stay. This room is facing the same direction as Jiang Hai's room, but Jiang Hai's room is facing both sides. It can see the grassland and the beach, but Fu Yuan's room is at the sea view room. After entering the room and hanging up his backpack, he, who was still a little sleepy in the car, was instantly energized. He picked up his phone and stood in front of the window, taking pictures continuously. He looked at the beach in the distance, the lawn under the villa, and the cows in the distance, and the waves in the blue ocean that rolled up from time to time. He was clearly more excited. Not only did he take pictures of the scenery, but he also took a few selfies. After the selfies were over, he insisted on taking pictures with Jiang Hai. When did you have this hobby? After a little reluctantly accompanied this silly guy to pose for some pictures, Jiang Hai glanced at this guy's profile. This guy really joined a lot of groups. There was his work group, Jiang Hai's classmate group. Jiang Hai didn't join this group. There was also his elementary school classmate group, high school classmate group, university group, family group. The mobile phone was not big, and there were more than 10 groups. At this time, he was sending these photos in these groups, including the photo with Jiang Hai. It's always been like this. I am the most talkative person. Don't you usually see my moments? While sending these things, Fu Yuan said excitedly. It was obvious that he had forgotten about sleeping. Oh, I blocked it. Who told you to always send some inexplicable things? Looking at Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle and said calmly. Fu Yuan really liked to send some inexplicable things. For example, he would send his breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even instant noodles every day. He would also often forward some inexplicable jokes and the like. Jiang Hai didn't have much energy to look at this. Jiang Hai was a little different from the young people nowadays. He didn't like to play with mobile phones very much. If he played, he would just play games. He wouldn't do things like browsing Weibo or Moments. Okay, you should take a rest, but don't sleep. This is called jet lag. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep at night. When you wake up later, I will treat you to a big meal. Looking at Fu Yuan in front of him, Jiang Hai said and helped him close the door. As for whether he would listen to Jiang Hai, that was not something Jiang Hai needed to consider. In the blink of an eye, it was already past 4:00. Jiang Hai knocked on Fu Yuan's door and found that this guy's eyes were red like a rabbit's. This was not crying, but this guy's eyes were bloodshot. It could be seen that he had been in a state of excitement just now. What's wrong with you? Did you just secretly touch her? Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai said with some doubts. Damn, do you really think I'm that perverted? After I just sent those photos, my goddess replied to me. Chapter 200. Yujia. As soon as he heard Fu Yuan say the word goddess, Jiang Hai's first impression was the giant beast sitting quietly over there when they attended the class reunion. Speaking of which, Fu Yuan's heavy taste was also recognized by everyone. Well, she asked me what I was doing, where I was, and so on. It seems that the goddess still cares about me. Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan's eyes began to drift. If it weren't for the fact that he was in the United States now, he might have already drifted to find his goddess. Oh, then do you want dinner or the goddess? Looking at Fu Yuan's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Dinner. Without any hesitation, Fu Yuan recovered his consciousness in an instant and said to Jiang Hai with a serious face. Why didn't you say goddess this time? Seeing that Fu Yuan had made a choice, Jiang Hai walked downstairs. It's said that when one is full, one will think about that. I'm still hungry. How can I have the leisure and energy to do that? By the way, what are we eating tonight? With a casual smile, Fu Yuan followed Jiang Hai downstairs. You can eat whatever you want. With Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai walked to the front of his cold storage and said with a mysterious face. Bullsh*t, I want to eat abalone. Looking at Jiang Hai with contempt, Fu Yuan said with a cold face. Yes, the best two-headed abalone. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai opened the door and pointed to a pool next to him. Following Fu Yuan's gaze, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. Sure enough, he saw a pile of fist-sized abalones crawling around in the pool. There were also many sea cucumbers in the pool. They were living sea cucumbers that were slowly wriggling under the water. Gulp, I also want to eat lobster. Looking at the things in the pool, Fu Yuan said with a serious face. Yes, will such a big one do? Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai had already walked into the cold storage. He grabbed a huge lobster in front of a table. Looking at this lobster that was at least 3 times bigger than the one that Jiang Hai had seen at the class reunion, Fu Yuan didn't know what to say. He immediately took out his mobile phone and began to take photos. Wow, this lobster, wow, these pincers, wow, this length, damn, it's a shrimp king. While taking photos, Fu Yuan's mouth didn't stop moving. What kind of shrimp king is this? There are many bigger ones in the sea. The ones we ate yesterday were bigger than this. Jiang Hai casually threw the lobster into his pocket. He was going to clean it up later. F***ck, you guys eat this stuff every day. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan was confused. Not every day. I can't get tired of eating it every day. When I want to eat it, I will go to the sea to catch a few. It's just a matter of a few minutes. Originally, when Jiang Hai said the first half of the sentence, he was relieved. If he ate these things every day, it would be too wasteful. But later, Jiang Hai told him that he was thinking too much. He didn't eat it every day because he would get tired of it. Looking at Jiang Hai's face that was corrupted by capitalism, Fu Yuan said bitterly. Then, he quickly ordered, F***ck, corrupt, shameless, evil capitalist society. People like you should hang a sign to criticize you. I want to eat this lobster, and this abalone, and this sea cucumber, okay, these were originally prepared for you. In fact, the main dish is still beef. After listening to Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai chuckled and walked to the compartment in the cold storage. As he opened it, dozens of processed beef were hanging in this space. The meat these years were all special grade A frost snow beef, but they were all frozen. Jiang Hai's manor now had a total of more than 20 people, nearly 30 people. Even if half of them were women, women still needed to eat. As a member of the manor, eating beef was inevitable. On average, each person consumed 2 pounds of beef every day. That was more than 50 pounds a day. An Angus bull weighed about 700 kilograms after this winter's fattening. The highest weight had reached 750 kilograms, which was about 1,500 pounds. The slaughter rate was 65%, which meant that nearly 1,000 pounds of meat could be produced. If all of this beef was eaten, one bull could feed the entire manor for 20 days. But because Jiang Hai's bulls were really good, the production rate of special grade A beef was extremely high. The people in the manor weren't willing to eat this meat. They were already very happy to be able to get some special and preferred meat. And these beef were all sent to Jiang Hai. But the problem was that Jiang Hai's bulls had a very high probability of producing special grade A beef. Almost every bull had it, and every bull would produce more than 10% of special grade A beef, which was more than 100 pounds. Sometimes, it could even reach 200 pounds. But the problem was that Jiang Hai couldn't eat so much, and the other people in the manor didn't dare to eat it because it was too expensive. So, Jiang Hai's special grade A beef was getting more and more. Almost every half a month, he would have more than 100 pounds of beef that had been cleaned up. Jiang Hai couldn't say much to Luo Binsi and the others, so he could only put it here first. Although frozen beef was not as delicious as ice, special grade A beef was special grade A. Even if it was raw, it was still delicious. Gulp. Looking at Jiang Hai's pile of beef, Fu Yuan couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Before he had eaten this kind of beef, he had only heard of it at most, but he had never seen it before. He didn't care much about this kind of beef. But after eating it, he knew the difference between this kind of beef and ordinary beef. The beef that Jiang Hai sent back to the country was divided into 10 pounds for each of them, and they had basically eaten it all these days, especially Fu Yuan's family. After the 5th day of the Chinese New Year, his parents came back and brought a group of relatives back, and they ate all the beef in one meal. When they were eating, although Fu Yuan was distressed, he couldn't say anything. After the meal, he told his father that this beef was more than 2,000 yuan per pound. His father almost ate the table when he heard it, although their family was not short of money. But more than 2,000 yuan per pound of beef, thinking about it, his father and his grandmother also felt distressed. Is this eating beef? This is eating gold bars. But at this time, the gold bars in their eyes were hanging everywhere in Jiang Hai's cold storage. When we go back this time, you have to give me some more of this beef. Looking at the beef in front of him, Fu Yuan's hands trembled. No problem, I'll take as much as I can. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. These are supreme delicacies in the eyes of others, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, it was just some beef, although it was the best beef. Hey! Why do you have a chicken here? Forcing himself to look away from the beef, he suddenly saw that in the cold storage, there was a chicken that had been cleaned up, but to call it a chicken, this chicken was too small. What kind of eyes are you looking at? This is not a chicken, this is a wyvern. Picking up the frozen thing on the ground, Jiang Hai said with some pity. Before Christmas, he and his men went to the forest. The turkey that was caught there was finished before Christmas, but Jiang Hai didn't eat the wyverns that they caught. Instead, he built a nest and raised them in the vegetable garden. Only the wyvern that was killed by little Huang, after cutting off its head, Jiang Hai froze the rest of its body. It's not that he didn't want to eat it, but he didn't know how to cook it. It was like shark's fin. Everyone knew that this was delicious, but who knew how to cook it? Wyvern? I haven't seen this in years. The meat of yours is so tight. Is it wild? Looking at Jiang Hai, the look of surprise on Fu Yuan's face became even more intense. Just like beef, Fu Yuan had actually eaten wyverns before. This was because when he was young, his father was a soldier. He was a local soldier in the northeast, and he was considered a soldier's relative. The place where he was a soldier was in a mountainous area. There were wyverns in the mountains, but when he was young, there weren't many wyverns left, but the soldiers still caught some to eat. When soldiers cooked in the wild, there were only 2 ways to eat, roast or stew. The ingredients were things that could be caught. Most of them were snakes and rabbits. Although they were wild, it wouldn't be delicious if you tried to cook them. Therefore, Fu Yuan had always thought that the flying dragon wasn't delicious. Until one day, a big boss came to his father's army for an inspection. The big boss brought along a chef with him. During a banquet at night, his father took him to have a meal. That was also the first time he ate a real wyvern soup. He also knew what it meant to have dragon meat in the sky and donkey meat in the ground. The freshness and tenderness were things that he would never forget in his life. However, ever since wyverns became a protected animal, he didn't have many opportunities to eat them. However, during that time, he learned how to cook wyverns. Initially, he thought that he might not have a chance to show off his skills in the future. However, at Jiang Hai's place, he could eat anything he wanted. Now, it was time for him to show off his skills. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. If he really knew how to cook wyverns, he could learn how to cook them himself. He wouldn't have so many wyverns left, and he would be in luck in the future. At that moment, the 2 of them looked at each other and started to pack. First, they packed 5 kilograms of the best ribeye. Then, they grabbed the big lobster, 10 big abalones, and a few big sea cucumbers before leaving the cold storage. There are a total of 3 ways to cook wyverns. One is to drink soup, and the other 2 are to eat meat. Which one do you want to cook? Looking at the wild wyvern in his hand, Fu Yuan's eyes lit up. He looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and asked. Eat meat, of course. Jiang Hai didn't like to drink soup. Of course, thick soup was an exception. At the very least, there had to be something to chew in the soup. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan hurriedly asked, Then do you have ginseng here? Mushrooms are fine too. I have American ginseng here. It's 10 centimeters long. You can choose from it. I also have good hazel mushrooms and pine mushrooms. Damn, so many. You even have pine mushrooms. I'm getting more and more envious of you, brother. Chapter 201. Actually, speaking of wyvern soup, it's very magical, but it's not too difficult to make. Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan began to work. While talking, he explained to Jiang Hai. There were a total of 3 ways to make wyvern soup. The first one was the simplest and also the most primitive way. In the mountains of Xing and Mountain, there was a minority called the Alunchen tribe. When Jiang Hai was young, he learned a children's song. It was sung like this. Tall heels, a layer of black, no, it was the tall Xing'an mountain range, a large forest, and in the forest lived the brave Alunchen people. This was the ethnic group. This ethnic group was also the ancestors of the flying dragon tribe. In the earliest days, this way of eating wyvern birds was their way of eating, which was also called drinking soup. It was divided into 2 ways. One was to cut the wyvern meat into small pieces and throw it into boiling water to cook for about 2 minutes. Then, some wild onions were sprinkled in, and it was ready to be drunk. Because the freshest taste had already entered the soup, the meat might not be cooked yet, but the soup was quite delicious. There was another method that was similar to this. That was to hold the wyvern in one hand and use the boiling water in the pot to continuously pour over the wyvern's body. When the wyvern's meat was about 60% cooked, the whole wyvern was thrown into the pot together with the minced green onions. After boiling for about 10 seconds, it was ready to drink. Similarly, the meat wasn't tasty, but the soup was extremely delicious. But there was one thing, this method could not be done with oil. Any bit of oil would destroy the freshness of the wyvern soup. Except for oil, salt, monosodium glutamate, and so on, no other seasonings could be added. Only the taste could be drunk. Therefore, in some people's eyes, the taste was a bit bland, and it was not very good. In addition to the wyvern soup, there were 2 other types of soup that could be eaten with meat. One was stewed with mushrooms, and the other was stewed with ginseng. The cooking method was basically the same. Remove the internal organs and impurities of the wyvern, put it in boiling water, soak it for a while, take it out, wash it, put it in a pot and add water. Of course, the best way was to add chicken soup. Then, add other ingredients, such as ginseng or mushrooms, ginger, spring onions, and cooking wine, boil it, and slowly stew it over a small fire. After stewing for about an hour, take out the wyvern and its accessories, add some salt, MSG, and pepper into the soup, boil it, and pour it into the bowl where the meat was taken out. It wasn't difficult to talk about it, and it wasn't difficult to make it either. However, the difficulty lay in controlling the fire. The reason why the flying dragon soup was famous was because it originated from the Tatar period. At that time, the flying dragons were exclusively for the royal family. Dragon meat in the sky, donkey meat on the ground. Many people had heard of this saying, but not many knew that the dragon meat referred to the wyvern. By the time the commoners had the opportunity to know what dragon meat was, it was already the modern era. Ever since the founding of the dynasty, the flying dragon soup was an indispensable dish in the state banquets. It was also because of this that the flying dragons were taken seriously by the people again. However, it was also because of this that there weren't many flying dragons in the country. This was because there were too many people who wanted to eat them. Because Jiang Hai's ingredients were very complete, Fu Yuan made the flying dragon ginseng pine mushroom soup today. The 2 of them first went to the place where the flying dragons were kept behind the house and caught 5 more flying dragons. This one died a long time ago and was used to make soup by Fu Yuan. It was already in the pot. Tonight, they were eating these 5 live flying dragons. They cut their throats, let their blood out, and scalded their feathers. In fact, killing a flying dragon was not much different from killing a chicken. After cleaning up, the soup for the flying dragon was almost ready. Then, Fu Yuan started to get busy. After about half an hour, the soup was finally ready. They even used a clay pot to stew it. Jiang Hai used his hand to fan the fragrance floating out of the pot. He clicked his tongue. This smell was really hard to describe. Although it was fragrant, it was not as fragrant as one would imagine. But if it was not fragrant, it was indeed very fragrant. Moreover, it was an indescribable fragrance. It was somewhat like the smell of chicken, but not quite. It was really difficult to distinguish. Next, it's up to you. After closing the lid, Fu Yuan sat in the kitchen and watched Jiang Hai prepare other things. Okay, just watch. After hearing what Fu Yuan said, Jiang Hai didn't stand on ceremony and began to clean up. The things he wanted to make were very simple. It was also something he often made. Baked lobster with cheese, steamed abalone, scallion braised sea cucumber, and 2 types of beef. One was made into steak, and the other was braised beef with red wine. Compared to the flying dragon soup, the taste of these things was more fragrant. He watched Jiang Hai busy there. Over here, Fu Yuan was also holding his phone and taking pictures left and right. Those raw materials were his main focus. He also put these pictures in his group chat. Once he put them in, they were much more shocking than the pictures he took in the house. In an instant, his group chat exploded. Especially when they saw the fist-sized abalone and the huge lobster, his group chat was about to go crazy. F***CK, such a long lobster. Did you hit the lottery? This is unreasonable. That abalone, one is enough for me to eat for a meal. You actually want to make 10 of them. Do you have any shame? I despise you to death for showing off. But then again, Brother Yuan, can you bring some back for me to try? XXX, we have lost all our face because of you. We won't accept food given to us. But little Yuan, if you take the initiative to bring some back for us, we can still try it for you. At that time, I will tell you where Yujia's address is. Looking at these exploding group chats, Fu Yuan's face would have cracked into a grin if there were ears to cover it. He hadn't shown his face in these group chats for a long time. He had to give himself full marks for bumping into a wall. No matter how busy Jiang Hai was, and no matter how annoying Fu Yuan was, the food was gradually cooked. Just as the steak was about to be ready, Daliana and Marian ran in from the other side. When Fu Yuan was resting in the afternoon, the 2 girls went to Mrs. Philemon's place. Recently, they had been very close to Jiang Hai's employees. This was a scene that Jiang Hai was quite willing to see. He wasn't sure if his blood would have an effect on these 2 girls. But even if it didn't have an effect, letting these 2 girls get more attention was something worth being happy about. You came at the right time. Go wash your hands and get ready to eat. Looking at the 2 girls who rushed in, Jiang Hai said. However, the 2 girls didn't wash their hands immediately. Instead, they gestured to Jiang Hai. Seeing the movements of the 2 girls, Jiang Hai understood that Marin Rupert was back. Hey, Fu Yuan, do you want to go see the helicopter? Jiang Hai was also very excited when he heard that Marin Rupert was back. After all, that was his first helicopter. He wanted to go and see it immediately, but when he looked back and saw Fu Yuan, who was still confused, he knew that if he didn't bring this guy along, he would be scolded to death if he found out, so he called him. Sure enough, as soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan jumped up. But after jumping up, he slowly sat back down and looked at the casserole pot on the stove. He was worried about the casserole pot. It's okay, my stove has a leaky automatic shut-off function, let's go. Looking at Fu Yuan's appearance, Jiang Hai also smiled, then he waved to Daliana and Marian and left the villa first. On the other side, Fu Yuan saw that Jiang Hai didn't care, so he gritted his teeth and ran out of the villa. The four of them went out of the villa and got on an F-750. With a roar, they ran to the hangar built by Jiang Hai. Sure enough, after arriving here, a helicopter was parked on the originally empty runway. It was the helicopter that Jiang Hai bought. The huge helicopter was parked there quietly at this time. Only Marin Rupert and the person in charge of maintenance were still talking. Seeing Jiang Hai's car coming, the two stopped talking temporarily. They knew that this was Jiang Hai's car. Boss. Looking at Jiang Hai who got out of the car, Marin Rupert took the initiative to greet him. After they left New York just now, in order to test the performance of the helicopter, they deliberately went to the sea area around Jiang Hai's manor before returning here. On the way, the two also found a place for Marin Rupert to drive for a while. If there were any problems, he had already felt it in advance. Now is the time to communicate. How about the plane? Can I use it? Patting the giant ladder beside him, Jiang Hai asked with some envy. He also wants to fly it, but the problem is that he doesn't know how to fly it. It seems that learning how to fly a helicopter is something he has to learn in the future. There are no problems with the hardware of the helicopter, just some adjustments. We can finish it in a while, and then we can use it to navigate tomorrow. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Marin Rupert naturally knew his purpose in coming here, so he immediately said. Although he was mainly here as a driver, there were a lot of people who knew how to drive a boat. He was mainly invited by Jiang Hai because he has a pilot license. Now is the time for him to show his ability. Okay, then can we go to sea in this thing tomorrow? Looking at the giant beast in front of him, Jiang Hai also asked excitedly. As soon as he said that, Fu Yuan, who was behind him, looked at Marlon Rupert, Delina, and Marion eagerly. It was obvious that they were also very interested in this plane. Of course, we will fly around tomorrow morning, and then when we fly again in the afternoon, the boss will take the two ladies and this gentleman with him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marin Rupert also smiled. The boss's wish must be fulfilled. Chapter 202. To tell you the truth, your place is amazing. I don't want to leave anymore. Fu Yuan said to Jiang Hai with a look of envy. After they finished looking at the plane, Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan returned to the villa. Jiang Hai originally wanted to invite Rabinsi and the others over to eat together. After all, it was more lively with more people. However, in the United States, there was no such thing as taking advantage of others. There was no New Year or holiday, and there was no such thing as housewarming. The people in the United States were not in the habit of treating others, not to mention that Jiang Hai was not lying down. In addition, although Fu Yuan was flirtatious, Jiang Hai knew that this kid was not very open when outsiders were around. In summary, Jiang Hai did not ask others to come back for dinner. There were only the four of them eating at home. Of course, this included Goldie, Xiaobai, Dai Tooth, and Chirp. Fu Yuan liked Goldie and Xiaobai from the bottom of his heart, but these two guys did not survive by pleasing others. Therefore, these two kept a respectful distance from him and left after eating their rations. Dai Tooth and Chirp were now Delina and Marion's pets, especially Dai Tooth. He was very fond of these two sisters who often gave him delicious food. Even if it was Jiang Hai's orders, he would sometimes obey in public but disobey in private. After the sisters finished eating, it left. As for Chiochio, it was still a young bird and couldn't understand human language. Seeing that its seniors had left, it also left. After there were no outsiders, Fu Yuan was a lot more relaxed. Jiang Hai had a lot of beer here. These were all bought from the Cowboy Song bar in town. The beer at Old Tony's was a bit bitter when he first drank it. However, after drinking it for a long time, he got used to it. The taste was really good, especially when it was chilled. At first, Fu Yuan was a little uncomfortable drinking this beer, but now he completely fell in love with it. If you don't want to leave, then stay a little longer. I have nothing to do here anyway. Jiang Hai shrugged. Although there were many people here to play with him, these people were not his friends after all. They were not equal and could not play with each other. Although the relationship between superiors and subordinates was not as tense as it was in China, Jiang Hai did not hang out with these American people. To be honest, in the entire manor, there was only Belle and Harriman who were about the same age as him. However, Harriman was stubborn. He took Jiang Hai's money for him to work, so he would not hang out with Jiang Hai at all. As for Bale, what should he play? Fight? Boring. Playing with guns? Jiang Hai also lost interest in playing. As for the others, Bale and Jiang Hai did not hang out. Apart from these two, there were only the 8 girls left. However, when you asked Jiang Hai to play with the girls, Jiang Hai felt a little awkward. He was such an awkward person. Hey, I'm just saying. Don't take it seriously. If I'm here, what will my father do? What will my mother do? Don't look at my job. It's because of my father's relationship that I got in. If I say I quit, he will skin me alive. Although he was a little drunk, Fu Yuan did not lose his mind. He could not help but say to Jiang Hai helplessly. After saying that, he took a big gulp of beer and laughed self-deprecatingly. Besides, I can't do anything here. It's not like you don't know how bad my English is. Alright, I'm not joking. Let's continue drinking. Picking up the beer cup in front of him, Fu Yuan and Jiang Hai drank another cup. Both of them drank half a cup in one gulp and then continued to chat. That night, they talked a lot. When Fu Yuan was so drunk that he almost crawled under the table, it was already past 1:00 in the morning. Jiang Hai looked at him. Although he was a little drunk, it was not heavy. He drank the last cup of beer. Jiang Hai grabbed Fu Yuan and went back to his room. As a man, he did not care about whether he was comfortable or not. If he wanted to take off a man's clothes, shoes, or face, he might as well kill him. Throwing him on the bed, Jiang Hai went back to his room to sleep. Time passed by, and the manor's night came quietly. When Jiang Hai woke up at 6:00 in the morning the next day, on the other side of the ocean in Wuxia, the sky had just turned completely dark. At this time, the nightlife had just begun. Holding up the phone, Chi Li's assistant, a girl wearing glasses, said anxiously, Boss, look, Fu Yuan just updated his WeChat moments. It's all about food. There's also a picture of your husband. Do you want to take a look? At this time, Chi Li had just finished approving the work that needed to be done today. She was leaning on her chair in a daze. When she heard Chi Li's words, she reacted for a moment. Then, she took Chi Li's phone and looked at it. The first thing that caught her eye was a huge lobster. It was a picture of what it looked like before and after it was cooked. In addition, there were big abalones, big sea cucumbers, the legendary dragon soup, steak, and so on. Of course, among the food, there were selfies of Fu Yuan and Jiang Hai. They really know how to enjoy themselves. Then, looking at Fu Yuan's WeChat moments, Chi Li snorted in disdain. Especially when she saw Jiang Hai's sweet smile in the picture, her handsome long eyebrows raised. Ever since the last unfriendly meeting with Jiang Hai, Chi Li realized that she would often think of Jiang Hai. If in the past, she would think of him once every 10 days or half a month, now she would think of him once every 2 or 3 days. Especially the image of Jiang Hai asking her to sign the divorce agreement. It was an image that she could not forget for a long time. This didn't mean that she had fallen in love with Jiang Hai, but this feeling made her very uncomfortable. It was like a doll that was originally hers. Although she didn't like it, it was still hers. But suddenly, one day, this doll had its own soul and no longer belonged to her. She had to take the initiative to draw a clear line between them. This was something she couldn't accept. Especially the feeling of being dumped, it made her very angry. Chi Li had been very strong since she was young. The only time she had been in a relationship was when she dumped someone else. Now that she was dumped, she felt extremely unbalanced in her heart. This made her feel that she had been humiliated. Even if it was a divorce, she should be the one dumping Jiang Hai. Why should Jiang Hai dump her? Therefore, she started to understand Jiang Hai's past, his present, and even his sly friends. She asked for Fu Yuan and the others' WeChat numbers from Jiang Hai's former class monitor. Then, she asked her assistant to add her. Fu Yuan and the others naturally had no resistance to being added by a beautiful woman. They quickly added each other. Every day, this girl saw their WeChat moments clearly. Obviously, Jiang Hai did not know that his brothers had become traitors. Director Qi, I think so too. These guys really know how to enjoy life. I don't even have such a big lobster. Cough. President Qi doesn't eat it often. This girl with glasses had seen a lot with Qi Li, but this was the first time she had seen the things in the photo. Cough. Oh right, the woman I asked you to investigate recently. Have you found anything? Hearing this, Qi Li could not help but cough lightly. She subconsciously wanted to say that she had not eaten it either, but fortunately, she stopped in time. Found it. Her name is Feng Yunshen. She is a print model. We found that she seems to be Lu Xingyang's mistress. Hearing Qi Li's words, the girl with glasses immediately took out Feng Yunshen's information from her pocket and handed it over. A mistress. Arrange it, I'll treat her to a meal. Qi Li glanced at the document, narrowed her eyes, and said in a low voice. Treat her to a meal? Okay, where should we go? Hearing that Qi Li wanted to treat this woman to a meal, the girl with glasses was very confused. But as an assistant, she knew that she only needed to do things obediently, so she raised her head and asked. Seafood restaurant. Let's go eat lobster. After thinking for a while, she didn't know why the lobster in the photo just now appeared in Qi Li's mind. She casually picked up the coat on the boss chair and said as she walked out. Ever since she and Jiang Hai had some inexplicable relationship on the 29th, these days, she and Jiang Hai seemed to have returned to the status of ordinary friends. Besides sending a New Year's message to Jiang Hai during the New Year, they had only sent 2 or 3 messages in total, and each time they spoke for a very short time. After about 5 or 6 messages, they went to do their own things. It was hard to say what the relationship between the two was, but after that night, it seemed that the originally estranged feelings were once again estranged. No one knew what was going on in Feng Yunshen's mind, but Jiang Hai really didn't think about her. On the 7th day of the new year, Feng Yunshen returned to the imperial capital because she had recently received a new job. As an internet celebrity, there were 4 main places to work. The first was CJ, the second was the various major car shows, the third was to shoot posters, take photos, and pictorials, and the fourth was to be a spokesperson. Of course, their endorsement fees weren't high, and they weren't like those big stars, endorsing makeup products, luxury goods, or even cars. Their endorsements were more for games, web-based games, and not those big productions. This kind of web-based game was very convenient to make, and it had been very popular in recent years. Hundreds of thousands of them were opened a year, and hundreds of thousands of them were closed. But these had nothing to do with Feng Yunshen. She only needed to come over and make a few coquettish poses, and then shout out an advertising slogan. What happened next had nothing to do with her. Tonight, she had just finished all the production of the game. Feng Yunshen left the set after rejecting the lecherous director's invitation to dinner. But just as she walked to the street, a Bentley stopped in front of her. Miss Feng, our chairman invites you to dinner. The back door opened and the bespectacled girl walked out of the back seat of the car with a smile. Chapter 203. The slightly dim Western restaurant had been booked at this time. Feng Yunshen walked in from the outside and looked at Qi Li, who was using tools to deal with the lobster in front of her, and looked at her with some surprise. Feng Yunshen also knew about this person. This woman seemed to be Jiang Hai's wife. Needless to say, she also knew why this woman called her here. If it were her, she would probably look for this person. Come, sit. Hearing the sound of Feng Yunshan's high heels hitting the ground, Qi Li slowly raised her head and glanced at the woman with light makeup in front of her. She said softly, and then continued to bury her head and deal with the lobster in front of her. It's getting late. If there's anything, you should just say it. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down. Then she looked at Qi Li, who was still dealing with the lobster, and thought for a moment and said in a deep voice. Don't worry, you haven't eaten yet, right? What do you want to eat? Order. Qi Li heard Feng Yunshan's words and said lightly. Hearing what she said, the waiter next to her also took the menu and was about to walk over, but he was stopped by Feng Yunshan. I don't need it. In our line of work, we basically don't eat at night. Let's get straight to the point. We are Northeastern girls. It's better to be straightforward. If I didn't guess wrong, you asked me to come here because of Jiang Hai. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Qi Li, who was still burying her head in dealing with the lobster, couldn't help but stop. She took the tablecloth next to her and elegantly wiped her mouth. Then she put the restaurant aside and raised her head slightly to look at the woman in front of her. Yeah, you guessed right. I asked you to come here because of Jiang Hai. Have you been in touch recently? Looking at Feng Yunshan in front of her, Qi Li said lightly as if she was talking about something she didn't care about. Oh, I did. Looking at Qi Li, Feng Yunshan also smiled. The two of them were of the same age, but although Qi Li, this little girl, had seen a lot of the world and talked about a lot of business, but compared to her, this bad woman who had been at the bottom of society for many years, she was still far behind. With just a few words, she refuted Qi Li's words. Originally, Qi Li thought that she would deny it and was even afraid. But now, it seemed that she was overthinking. Have you contacted him many times? Unconsciously, Qi Li's hand tightened slightly as she looked at Feng Yunshan and continued to ask calmly. This. I don't have to tell you. This is my privacy. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan smiled. Let me tell you, don't be so arrogant. We've already investigated your situation. You're just a homewrecker who hasn't risen to the top yet. What are you being so arrogant about? Do you think that because Lu Jingri is your backer, you can ignore it? Let me tell you, in our eyes, Lu Jingri is just a small piece of dirt. We can crush him whenever we want. Looking at Feng Yunshan's uncooperative look, the assistant with glasses couldn't help but take a step forward, put a hand on her shoulder, and said while gritting his teeth. I know, when you investigated me, I also investigated you a little, but what I know is definitely not as detailed as you. I can't afford to provoke the Qi group. Feng Yunshan chuckled as she patted the assistant's hand away. If you think that I'm relying on Lu Jingri, then I feel that there is no need to talk about it between us anymore. Lu Jingri and I are now more of a face-saving money relationship. He gives me money, and I support him in some private meetings. To be honest, his life and death has nothing to do with me, but I'm a loyal person. After all, he gives me money to spend, so at least I won't go against him on the surface. But if he really falls, then I can't be blamed. You say, if I really go to Jiang Hai, based on that night's relationship, do you think with his character, he will take me in? Looking at Qi Li, Feng Yunshan blinked and said. Maybe, but haven't you considered that it's impossible between you and Jiang Hai? Hearing what Feng Yunshan said, Qi Li's eyes couldn't help but narrow. It has been many years since anyone dared to threaten her. This feeling made her very uncomfortable. But Qi Li knew that Feng Yunshan was telling the truth. Jiang Hai was an indecisive person. Whatever he did, he only relied on enthusiasm. After 3 minutes of hot-bloodedness, he would return to a state of laziness. Moreover, he was soft-hearted because of old feelings. If this woman really went to Jiang Hai, it was estimated that Jiang Hai would really take her in. I know, from the night I had with Jiang Hai, I knew that he was just a little impulsive. After releasing the hormones that made him crazy, he would regret and regain his rationality. But I didn't think of marrying him or even becoming his only. Don't forget, I'm now a mistress. It's okay to change to a man with more potential and ability to continue to be a mistress. I don't even care if I'm a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th. I think it's just one more woman by his side. Jiang Hai won't abandon me, right? Gently playing with her curly hair, Feng Yunshan pouted slightly at Qi Li. Looking at her appearance, Qi Li knew that she would return empty-handed tonight. Well, I think there's nothing else to talk about between us. Don't make it impossible for me to live in the country. You'd better pray that I live more comfortably in the country so that I won't have to go abroad to find Jiang Hai. Of course, if you want to find someone to kill me, then I may not be able to escape. After all, I'm just a fart. But if this matter is exposed, I feel that it's worth it to have the Qi group buried with me. Seeing that Qi Li was speechless, Feng Yunshan smiled, stood up, picked up her small bag on the table, then chuckled, turned, and walked out. President Qi, are you letting her go just like that? Seeing her staggering out of the restaurant, Qi Li's face became even gloomier. The assistant with glasses also walked to Qi Li's side and asked in a low voice. Don't worry about her. The reason why she dares to be so arrogant now is because she knows that I can't do anything to Jiang Hai. Let's talk about it later. The most important point of this matter is still Jiang Hai. Qi Li gently tapped the table with the knife and fork in her hand. Then, she continued to bury her head and deal with the lobster in front of her. As for Feng Yunshan, after leaving the Western restaurant, she couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. At the end of February in the imperial capital, there was a faint sweat on her forehead. In fact, the toughness just now was more of a show of force. Qi Li's aura was far from what she could compare to. Although she dared to pull the emperor off his horse, the barefooted people were not afraid of wearing shoes. But people were selfish. No one would be willing to use their own life to exchange for someone else's life. What's more, even if Qi Li wanted her life, Qi Li might not be willing to die with her. Speaking of this, it was the sorrow of a small person, but she saw it clearly. After leaving the Western restaurant, she took a taxi and returned to her residence. Lying on the bed, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Now that she offended Qi Li, it was impossible for Lu Jingri to protect her. What's more, Lu Jingri might not protect her and turn against the Qi Corporation. After all, compared to her, money was more important to Lu Jingri. The only person who can protect me now seems to be Jiang Hai. I'll do some research and see if I can go to Jiang Hai for a photo shoot. After hesitating for a moment, Feng Yunshan seemed to have made up her mind. She grabbed her phone and looked at it. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know this scene in the imperial capital. He had already gotten up. After washing up, he went out for a run. Recently, he had developed the habit of running a lap every morning. On the way, he went to see his horse, Xiao Xia, fed some carrots, brushed its hair, and let it out to run a few steps. After everything was done, it was already past 8:00 in the morning. After he returned to his villa, he found that Daliana and Marian had already gotten up and were helping to clean up the house, but Fu Yuan still didn't make any movements. It was understandable. After all, he had been on a plane for more than 10 hours, and then he had jet lag. He also drank so much last night. But after waiting for a while, when it was almost 9:00, Jiang Hai really didn't want to wait any longer. He directly opened the door of Fu Yuan's room and dragged him up. I'm so sleepy. Is there any activity today? Fu Yuan reluctantly got up, washed his face, and brushed his teeth. He leaned against the door frame of his room with a sleepy face and said to Jiang Hai listlessly. There are plenty of activities today. It depends on what you want to do. We can go to sea, fish, swim. It may still be a little cold now, but the ice in the Danshui River has melted. We can go there to shoot fish, or to burn guns, or to hunt birds in the forest, or to ride horses, or to play in Winthrop. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai counted one by one. It may not be safe to go to Boston now, but going to Winthrop is not a problem. He didn't know before he counted, but after counting, Jiang Hai was shocked. It seems that there are more and more fun things in his manner. Then let's go fishing. I remember that we can take a plane in the afternoon. We can go fishing first, and then take a plane in the afternoon. Speaking of which, I haven't fished in the sea before. I used to play in reservoirs or fish ponds. Fu Yuan looked at Jiang Hai counting one by one. To be honest, Fu Yuan wanted to play a lot of things. Although there are no beasts in Jiang Hai's forest, it is still good to hunt birds. But shooting a bird was still good. What's more, although he had touched a gun before, what kind of gun was Jiang Hai's? It was completely different. Fu Yuan had never played fishing before, but he is quite interested in it. Riding horses and strolling around the manor are also fun. However, compared to going out to sea, these things that he wanted to play with could only be postponed for now. Although Bing City is not an inland city, it is still very far from the sea. Fu Yuan had never been to the sea since he was young. Chapter 204. Jiang Hai has a lot of people who know how to sail. Edward Anderson, Tommy Charles, Andrew Christian, and Eleanor Cece all know how to sail Jiang Hai's fishing boat. As for the small boat, it's not a problem. Even the half-baked Philemon Turner knows how to sail, but the best at it are Marin Rupert and Belle Lester. But today, both of them have something to do. They are going to fly a helicopter together. After all, this helicopter was bought for the two of them. Since they got helicopters, not only are they needed to patrol the sea, but they can also use this thing to patrol the ranch. Although Jiang Hai is not doing his job properly, at least he won't compete with his manor for resources. Besides, he's just going to fish. He's not going to do anything, so there's no need for too many people to follow him. So today, he could only call Edward Anderson to help him sail the boat. Jiang Hai took Delina, Marian, Xiaobai, Little Huang, and Dai Fong to board the boat together. Of course, the most important one is Fu Yuan. They're going on an outing today. They didn't drive a large boat, but an open boat. For fishing, this boat is enough. After the boat left the dock, it began to speed up and headed outside the coral reef. Today, Fu Yuan's outfit is very flashy. He's wearing fancy clothes that are not thick, and he's also wearing a huge pair of sunglasses. Recently, the weather in Boston has been good. The highest temperature can reach 7 or 8 degrees, and at night, it's more than 3 degrees. The weather is good, but after all, it's winter. Dressing like this is courting death. Originally, he didn't feel anything when he was on the boat. He was still taking selfies there, but when the boat started to speed up, he nestled in the cabin. Fortunately, Jiang Hai has already prepared clothes, otherwise, he would have frozen to death. You wouldn't be so cold if you were less flashy. Looking at Fu Yuan wrapped in a thick down jacket, Jiang Hai said with amusement. You don't understand. This is called, achoo, beauty conquers the cold. Fu Yuan rolled his eyes at Jiang Hai and said proudly. The problem is that you're not beautiful. She looked at him with disdain. If he was beautiful, then so be it. The problem was that he didn't even know what he looked like. Beauty conquers the cold, this sentence didn't exist for him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan pursed his lips, but he didn't dare to show off. He sat in the cabin and played with Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang. This time, because the cabin was too small, the two dogs had nowhere to hide. They could only accept his abuse. They couldn't bite him. After all, the IQ of these two dogs wasn't low. They also knew that this was their master's good friend, so they could only try their best to avoid his claws, but it was inevitable that he would bump into them once or twice. In this way, under the chase between Fu Yuan and the two dogs, the cabin was filled with a foul atmosphere, but Jiang Hai didn't care. It had been a long time since his place was so lively. Looking at the three of them playing around, he felt much more lively. Although he had no choice but to temporarily stop his treasure hunting plan because of Fu Yuan's arrival, it was all worth it. "Boss, we're here." The boat had been sailing for about 3 hours. When it was almost lunchtime, Ai Dehua stopped the boat and walked to the cabin. Looking at Fu Yuan, who was tired of playing in the messy cabin, he said to Jiang Hai speechlessly. This time, the place where they were fishing was no longer within the scope of Jiang Hai's fishing ground. After all, Jiang Hai's fishing ground was now only divided into 2 parts, the coral reef part and the sand part. The fish in the sand part had basically been caught. Although there were still fish, there weren't many. It wasn't a good place to fish. The coral reef was obviously not a good place to fish. There were too many reefs. Sea fishing was different from river fishing. It was too easy to get stuck on the reefs. Thinking back to the lead blocks that Jiang Hai threw away in the past, the number of fish killed was more than the number of fish he caught. Although his level had improved, don't forget, he was still just an unorthodox fisherman. Coupled with Fu Yuan, who was even more unorthodox, Jiang Hai felt that the 30 lead blocks he brought might not be enough. So he didn't play in the coral reef area, but went to the extension of the sand, the junction of his fishing ground and the open sea. It was considered safe here, and there were a lot of fish. "Great, hurry up and give me the fishing rod. Let me show off my skills." As soon as he heard that they had finally arrived, Fu Yuan, who was a little sleepy, suddenly jumped up and said excitedly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also took out the box under his seat. There were a lot of fishing rods in it. Perhaps due to the influence of Ai Dehua and the others, Jiang Hai didn't have too many requirements for the brand of fishing rods. Indeed, choosing a fishing rod was more about the material, not the brand. Of course, the brand also represented something in some aspects. But for a layman like Jiang Hai, pure luxury wasn't necessary. Jiang Hai's special fishing rod was a 4.5-meter long carbon fiber fishing rod. He bought it for $300. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't very expensive either. Including other fishing lines and the like, it cost less than $400 in total. Of course, the most important thing was the fishing license. While Jiang Hai was packing up his own fishing rod, Fu Yuan impatiently took out a similar fishing rod and walked out of the cabin. Even Ai Dehua came out with a similar fishing rod. He knew Jiang Hai's ability very well. If they relied on the fish they caught for lunch, they would probably starve to death. After the 3 of them were ready, Ai Dehua took out the bait that he had prepared beforehand. Clam worms. These fishermen didn't have as many considerations as those fishing enthusiasts. In their eyes, fake bait was never as good as live bait. Jiang Hai felt the same way. It wasn't the first time Jiang Hai had seen clam worms, but every time he saw them, Jiang Hai would shudder. They were too disgusting. Compared to Jiang Hai, who was afraid of worms, Fu Yuan was much calmer. After hanging the bait on the huge hook, Fu Yuan threw the bait as far as possible. Then, as Jiang Hai said, he slowly reeled in the line to make it taut. Sea fishing was different from river fishing. After Fu Yuan threw 2 lead blocks, he threw the bait in the right position for the first time. As for Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua, they had already finished baiting. While waiting, Fu Yuan couldn't hold back. It seemed that he was very satisfied with his fishing skills, just like Jiang Hai in the past. "Old Jiang, let's make a bet." Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan raised his eyebrows and said, "Bet? What bet?" Looking at Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai asked curiously, but he was obviously very interested. "Let's bet on who catches it first. The loser will treat them to a treasure sword." Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be interested, Fu Yuan said seriously, "Treasure my ass, you really want to go?" Glancing at Delina and Marion not far away, he didn't want to teach his 2 daughters bad things. He turned back and gave Fu Yuan a middle finger. "Is this guy too bored in China?" "No, you see, it's not easy for me to come here. I have to ride a foreign horse. Otherwise, I will be laughed at when I go back. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan couldn't help but say awkwardly. In fact, he was just saying. If Jiang Hai were to take him to those prostitutes, then he would certainly dare to do so. However, if Jiang Hai were to take him there, then he would be afraid of being attacked by immortals. After all, he was alone in a foreign land. If something were to happen, then he would lose his integrity. I'm not interested in this thing. If you want me to tell you the place, let's change the bet. Glancing at him contemptuously, Jiang Hai flatly refused his proposal. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan couldn't help smacking his lips. Then what should we bet? Bet on food? You are better here than anywhere else. Bet on alcohol, I can't beat you in drinking. Bet money? It's not mahjong, 3 yuan, 2 yuan, it will hurt our relationship. Then what should we bet? Just when Fu Yuan was struggling with what to bet with Jiang Hai, his fishing line suddenly tightened, and then a huge force came from below the sea level. I haven't decided what to bet yet. Forget it, I won't bet, I got hooked first. With a strange cry from Fu Yuan, he wanted to pull the line up, but halfway through, he found that the line was a little far. Only then did he remember that he was fishing at sea, so he slowly began to pull the line up. When he found that the force on the other side was particularly strong, he began to release the line. According to what Jiang Hai taught him, he pulled the fish bit by bit. This also surprised Jiang Hai. Fu Yuan's luck is much better than his. Old Jiang, quick, help me get my phone. When I catch it, remember to take a photo of me. While pulling the fish, Fu Yuan didn't forget to ask Jiang Hai to take photos for him. This is a good opportunity to show off. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile, but he didn't refuse his words. Instead, he took out his phone from his pocket and waited next to him. It's been so long, the fish you caught must be big. Seeing that he has been fishing with the fish for more than 10 minutes, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little curious. After all, he usually fishes with Ai Dehua and others. With his understanding of fishing, the fish should be big for such a long time. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also said with a proud face. Of course, don't you know who caught it? With this strength, this explosive force, and this powerful physical strength, I can guarantee that this fish is at least half a meter long. Half a meter? Okay. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. This guy really dares to say anything. After a few more minutes, after a disdainful struggle, Fu Yuan finally pulled the fish to the side of the boat. When the fish broke out of the water, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He only saw that on Fu Yuan's fishing rod, there was a small fish more than 10 centimeters long, shaking there vigorously. What's the matter, why is it so small? Looking at the small fish on the hook, Fu Yuan also had a look of disgust and was completely puzzled. Chapter 205. This is a sea bass, a very ferocious carnivorous fish. It's a relative of freshwater bass. The largest fish can grow up to 1 meter long, but yours is obviously a small cub. Looking at the fish that Fu Yuan caught, Jiang Hai couldn't help but explain to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan couldn't help but curl his lips. In fact, this fish isn't very small. It's much bigger than the average crucian carp, but compared to the adult fish that can grow up to 1.2 meters, this fish is much smaller. Although this fish is still a small cub and will be despised, no matter what, this is still Fu Yuan's harvest. So looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, he immediately said, no matter what, this is also the first fish that I caught. You guys haven't opened yet, ding ling ling ling. But before his voice fell, Edward Anderson's fishing rod rang. Then they saw Edward Anderson catching a fish with long spikes on its back. The size of this fish is more than twice as big as Fu Yuan's, about 40 centimeters long, and it looks much more ferocious. Looking at this fish, Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan both leaned over. What kind of fish is this? Looking at Edward Anderson, who didn't care about it and threw it into the bucket next to him, Fu Yuan asked Jiang Hai curiously. This was too much of a slap in the face. He had just finished saying that they hadn't harvested yet, and this guy who looked very tough caught the fish. It was really bad luck. Oh, this is a white-spotted scorpion fish, also known as stone dog, or stone fish. It's distributed in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. There are a lot of them, and it's much more delicious than your fish. By the way, generally speaking, we use fish that are more than 10 centimeters as bait. Looking at Fu Yuan's curious look, Jiang Hai didn't forget to attack him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. He was usually the biggest braggart, but he couldn't stand others showing off in front of him, especially Jiang Hai, who took other people's results and showed off in front of him. *CK, this was also fished by Uncle Ai Hua. You're so arrogant. If you have the ability, why don't you catch one? But as soon as his voice fell, Jiang Hai's fishing line that was originally erected at the bow of the boat was instantly straightened. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he gave Fu Yuan a thumbs up. This guy's mouth is blessed. But now isn't the time to study the problem of whether Fu Yuan's fishing line is blessed or not. Jiang Hai also quickly ran to the fishing rod and pulled it up. As soon as Jiang Hai touched the fishing rod, he felt that the fishing rod couldn't help but sink. After he tried it, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. The pulling force of this fish can't be said to be weak, but it's not too strong either. If he's not wrong, it should be a kind of fish that isn't too fierce. It's about 60 centimeters in size. This isn't a problem for Jiang Hai. As his strength increased, under the loose clothes, his muscles bulged instantly, but others couldn't see it. In the eyes of Fu Yuan and the others, Jiang Hai was just there leisurely swinging the fishing rod. You took the bait? The fish isn't big, I think you don't even need to fight. Seeing Jiang Hai's movements, Fu Yuan couldn't help but come to his side with a smile and said to him with a proud face. But hearing his words, Jiang Hai just smiled, but the speed of his hands slowly increased. Not long after, as Jiang Hai pulled hard, a huge golden figure instantly appeared on the side of the boat. As soon as he saw the fish here, Ai Dehua was also stunned for a moment, then he couldn't help but happily give Jiang Hai a thumbs up. Then he used the net and fished this big fish out of the water. What the hell, so big? As the net landed, a big golden fish about 65 centimeters long also appeared in front of everyone. As soon as he saw this fish, Fu Yuan was stunned. This fish is not only big, but it's also very beautiful. The whole fish is golden, and there are 6 ring-shaped horizontal bands on its body. At first glance, you can tell that it's very awesome. After all, if it's not awesome, it wouldn't dare to make itself into a local tyrant. This is a 6-banded trevally. I didn't expect it to be a yellow one. Our luck is good. The taste of this fish, well, it's not bad, but since it's so big, it can be considered to have grown up. Today's lunch is settled. Looking at the big fish at his feet, Jiang Hai smiled and said coldly. In fact, this is also the biggest edible fish he has ever caught. If the big fool doesn't count, this should be the second sea fish he caught. Usually, he always goes fishing in the river. As for the 6-banded trevally, it is a kind of stingray fish, distributed all over the world. It can be found in the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, and even the Arctic Ocean. It's not a very valuable fish. Its main colors are gray, yellow, and black. Generally speaking, such a big adult fish is black. But Jiang Hai's luck is obviously good. Damn, you want to kill and eat such a beautiful fish, you prodigal son. Let's not talk about other things first, let me hold it and take a picture. Glancing at Jiang Hai with contempt, Fu Yuan stuffed the phone into Jiang Hai's hand, then ran to the front of the fish, holding it and taking a picture. Needless to say, he's going to show off again. With this fish, Ai Dehua is not in a hurry to catch. He and Jiang Hai are the same, these fish are all for eating. Unless they catch a very valuable fish like sume, wavy lip fish, tuna, sailfish, or marlin, they will keep it. Otherwise, they will eat it when they need to. Although the 6-banded trevally is not very much, it's still a lot. But it's not a problem to catch more than 100,000 tons per year. They are used to this kind of fish. Boss, I'm going to cook. You can play for a while. Seeing that Fu Yuan has finished taking photos, Ai Dehua also put away the fishing rod and said to Jiang Hai in English. Then he walked into the cabin with the stone dog he just caught and Jiang Hai's 6-banded trevally. Although the ship is not very big, there is still a place for simple cooking. Are you really going to eat that fish? TSK, it's a waste. It's so beautiful to keep at home. Seeing Ai Dehua leave with the fish, Fu Yuan couldn't help but feel a little regretful. The fish really fit his aesthetic standards. This could be seen from his apple 6P Nouveau Riche Gold. This color was really popular in China now. This kind of fish will change color. Do you still want to play? Looking at Fu Yuan with a smile, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Let's play. It took us 3 hours to get here. I won't just catch one fish and leave. Let's continue. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also rebaited and threw it into the sea. In the next 2 hours, the two caught a lot of things. The reason why it was called things was because in addition to fish, there were a lot of toys, such as water plants, squid, crabs, wine bottles, and even a used trap. They don't know who threw it. It was really unethical. In the end, the two resisted the nausea and threw it into the bin that came with the ship. Of course, in addition to these things, there was also a lot of fish. Among them, the most abundant was the largest specialty of this sea area, codfish. This kind of codfish was different from the codfish eaten in China. Even Fu Yuan was extremely excited. In addition to codfish, there was also herring. This kind of small fish is also very common in this sea area. It's not big, but it tastes good. Of course, there are different ways to cook it. For example, some people in Europe like to eat canned herring. They put live herring directly into the can. When opened, it stinks. On the world's dark food ranking, this thing is ranked second. As for the first place, cough, after catching 8 or 9 fish, Ai Dehua also told them to put away the fishing rod because the grilled fish was ready. Ai Dehua was about to set sail, so he didn't accompany Jiang Hai and the others to drink. After a simple bite, he went to the steering room and drove the boat to the dock. As for Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan, they sat in the cabin, enjoying the sea breeze while eating sea fish and drinking the beer that Jiang Hai specially brought. The feeling was quite comfortable. As for Fu Yuan, he became a show-off again, constantly attacking the hearts of the young people who had already started work. This kind of life was indeed very fascinating. Unknowingly, it was already 3:00 in the afternoon, and Jiang Hai and the others had already seen the dock in the distance. Fortunately, both of them knew that it was noon, so they didn't drink too much. Before arriving at the dock, they packed up everything. With Jiang Hai's order, they didn't go home, but went directly to the aircraft warehouse. When they came back, Jiang Hai had already contacted Belle and Marin Rupert. In the afternoon, they would fly around before going back. His good friend wanted to have fun, so he had to satisfy him. Soon, the group drove to the aircraft warehouse, where Marin Rupert and Belle Lester had been waiting for a long time. How is this helicopter? Is it comfortable to fly? Jiang Hai asked the two as he patted the big guy in front of him. It's not a bad aircraft. The power and cruise are all very good. The most important thing is that it's not only heavy, but also very heavy. It's also quite easy to operate. If you put some weapons on it, it can directly participate in the war. As soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, Belle, who had just tried it, said with excitement. Hearing his words, Fu Yuan's eyes became even brighter. Let's go, since it's very good, let me, the boss, sit down and play. Daliana and Marian sit in the back, Fu Yuan and I sit in the middle, and you two sit in the front. As soon as he heard Bell's words, Jiang Hai shouted for the first time. Okay, boss, sit down first, fasten your seatbelt, and then put on your helmet, but before we go to play, we have to refuel first. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marin Rupert also nodded seriously. Chapter 206. Refuel? What refuel? Gasoline? Jiang Hai was also stunned when he heard refuel. He asked Marlin strangely. Sort of. Aviation gasoline is much more expensive than gasoline, but we can only add this. Marlin Rupert thought for a moment when he heard Jiang Hai's words. He turned his head and said to Jiang Hai. Then he started the engine and the main and auxiliary propellers began to rotate. Then the lift increased and Jiang Hai and the others directly left the ground, heading towards a gas station not far from them. Gasoline was naturally divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades. The good ones were relatively pure, and the cheap ones were relatively diluted. Of course, not all cars could use good gasoline. Some of the worst cars would also break down if they used good gasoline. As for some of the better cars, if they used bad oil, the car would also break down. Although Jiang Hai didn't know much about gasoline, he had bought a car after all, so he still had some understanding of gasoline in the United States. Cars in the United States were calculated by gallons, not liters. In most areas of the United States, a gallon of gasoline was not more than $2, and a gallon was about 3.78 liters. It was said that gasoline in the United States was cheap, and it could be seen here. A liter was about 50 cents, which was about 3 yuan in RMB. Of course, this referred to the price of the worst gasoline. The so-called gasoline labels here are different from the more common 93 and 97 labels in China. The labels here were 87, 89, and 93. 87 was regular, standard, 89 was silver, silver, and 93 was gold, gold quality. There were number 93 and 97 in China. This didn't mean that the gasoline in China was better than in the United States. On the contrary, the calculation in China was not the same. The 97 gasoline in China was probably equivalent to 87 in the United States. Usually, Jiang Hai would also go to the gas station to refuel, but he really hadn't used any other labels besides the gasoline here. Bell may have noticed Jiang Hai's doubts. While Marin Rupert was flying the plane, Bell explained to Jiang Hai through the headset about aviation oil. Aviation oil was a special equipment for refueling planes. For example, passenger planes and the like were all filled with this kind of fuel. The so-called fuel cost in the country was also referring to this kind of fuel. Generally speaking, aviation gasoline was used. It was better to use aviation kerosene. However, kerosene was like diesel in gasoline. Although it was strong, it would damage the machine. Unless it was a large aircraft, it would not be added under normal circumstances. Jiang Hai's plane was fueled with aviation fuel. Many gas stations in the United States had this type of fuel. The location was in the middle of Jiang Hai and the B City Airport. It was only a 10-minute drive, but it would be faster if they took a plane. They would arrive in a few minutes because they had already refueled here yesterday, so it was convenient. After explaining the purpose of their visit, the staff at the gas station went to prepare the aviation fuel. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. They stood around the plane and chatted. At this moment, a motorcade suddenly came from a distance. Jiang Hai and the others' eyes were attracted by the roaring engine. They looked up and found that there were quite a lot of motorcade. There were 6 or 7 cars, and these cars were not ordinary cars, SUVs, or Jiang Hai's pickup trucks. Jiang Hai looked around. He recognized the 2 cars in front. They should be Land Rovers based on the logo, but he did not know the other cars. They are all civilian armored vehicles. Boss, you can go back first. Compared to Jiang Hai, Bell was able to see more clearly. After all, he had dealt with this kind of car for many years. He immediately said to Jiang Hai, then climbed back into the pilot's cabin. He took out a Beretta 92F from the front compartment and loaded it into the holster on his leg. It did not mean that these people were not hostile. It just meant that one had to be vigilant. There were so many shootings in the United States every year. It was not just a series of numbers. They had to be prepared. He didn't know if they saw Jiang Hai, or if they also needed to refuel, but the car in front of them turned on its turn signal and drove towards the gas station. As the car drove to the gas station, it also lined up to refuel. Looking at those big behemoths, Jiang Hai wondered if he should buy one of these cars. It looked better than the F-650. While Jiang Hai was still thinking, a man got out of the passenger seat of the last car in the motorcade. However, as soon as the man got out of the car, Jiang Hai noticed the gun he also had on his lap. It was a .50 caliber Desert Eagle. Because Jiang Hai also had one, he saw the man talking to the people in the car and walked over to Jiang Hai's side. As the man approached, Jiang Hai and the others also noticed the man's appearance. This person looked to be about 2 meters tall. He was a particularly tall white man with a beard on his face. Although it wasn't long, he had a lot of character. He was wearing camouflage clothes and a small green hat on his head. If it wasn't for the small green hat, the feeling he gave off might be even stronger. But now, the feeling he gave Jiang Hai was that this person's heart was relatively big. With such a big thing happening in his family, he still had the leisure to come out and play. Of course, in fact, the United States did not have such a saying. What's the matter? Seeing the big man walking over, Bell's eyes narrowed. The recent events in the manor made him have to be careful, so when the man was about 10 meters away from them, he shouted. "Oh, it's like this. I want to ask, how far is it from here to Alabakia Mountain?" Hearing Bell's words, the big man naturally knew the habit of the United States. Since the other party asked you from so far away, it means that they don't want you to get close, so he took the initiative to stop and said to Bell, "You are in the wrong place. If you go further, you will reach Winthrop, but fortunately, it is not too late for you to turn around now. From here, it will take about 3 hours to drive west." Hearing the big man's words, Bell also said to him, "Oh, God, I knew I was in the wrong place, Paul, you bastard, you led me to the wrong place." Hearing Bell's words, the big man couldn't help but pat his forehead helplessly, then turned his head and shouted at the first car that had finished refueling. Hearing his words, the person in the driver's seat also jumped out. He was also a white man, about 40 years old, but compared to this big man, this person was much quieter. He was about 1.75 meters tall, had short blonde hair, white skin, and a clean-shaven face. He also wore a pair of glasses, and the clothes on his body were only a loose shirt. After hearing this man's words, the middle-aged man hurriedly ran over with a map. "Shut up, Will, I'm sorry, can you tell us where we are now?" Looking at the big man who was a little exasperated, the middle-aged man couldn't help but shout, then came to Bell's side with a smile and showed him the map. Bell saw this man early in the morning, and after finding that this man was not armed, he let him approach him. After receiving the map, Bale looked at it and pointed out their current location. "Oh, damn, it's so far off." Looking at the location on the map, the middle-aged man couldn't help but say helplessly, "God, we definitely can't get there tonight. Let's find a place to rest for the night and then talk about it tomorrow." Hearing Bell say that it takes 3 hours to get there, the big white man couldn't help but sigh helplessly. It's already past 3:00 in the afternoon, it will be past 6 o'clock when they get there. They still have to set up camp and put down tents in the dark environment. Thinking about it, they feel a little panicked. "Hey, buddy, where are you going?" Hearing the words of the big man, Jiang Hai walked to his side. After confirming that these people were not hostile, Jiang Hai also relaxed a lot. He always remembered that there were no mountains near Boston, but this guy clearly said that he was going to a mountain. Could it be that he heard it wrong? "We are going to the Alabakia Mountains to hunt there." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Will said with a smile, and as he spoke, he patted the desert eagle on his lap. Hunting? As soon as he heard about hunting, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up again. It's not that he hasn't hunted before. Well, if he caught a turkey, then he has hunted before. Other than that, he really hasn't hunted before. Now when he heard Will's words, Jiang Hai's eyes also lit up instantly. Yeah, hunting can also be regarded as burning guns. We are all from the Firearms Enthusiasts Association and the Wilderness Survival Association. We regularly organize some people to go to the wilderness to hunt, stay in tents, and feel nature. Seeing that Jiang Hai was very interested, Will here also explained to Jiang Hai. In Will's words, they organize such a wilderness survival every month or a month and a half. Of course, wilderness survival in the United States is not the same as backpackers in China because environmental protection is stronger, so many wilderness survival places in the United States are actually quite dangerous. In addition to people, wild animals are also a big problem. According to Will, once they went to Alaska, he even hunted a polar bear there. Of course, usually when they go into the mountains, they just hunt some rabbits, wild boars, deer, and so on, but even these small things are very interesting to Jiang Hai. After all, he has never even hunted these small things. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look back at Fu Yuan. As a result, he found that Fu Yuan's eyes were even brighter. Although fishing, taking a helicopter, riding a horse, shooting fish, and so on are quite interesting, how can it be more fun than hunting? Chapter 207. Since he was interested, he could act directly if the conditions were right. Therefore, after communicating with Fu Yuan with his eyes, Jiang Hai directly asked the big man in front of him, Hey, brother, we are residents of this area. We are half a gun enthusiast, and we are also very interested in wilderness survival. Do you think we can go together? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big man named Will couldn't help but grin. Of course, no problem, but I have to ask the others if they mind. You know, our team was originally put together temporarily. After Will finished speaking, he went to the side and found Paul, who was still listening to Belle, and explained Jiang Hai's intention. When he heard that Jiang Hai wanted to go into the mountain with them, Belle Lester couldn't help but be stunned, but he didn't say anything. But in his heart, he made up his mind. If Jiang Hai and the others really want to go, then he must follow them. Of course, this is not a problem, but Jiang, our cars here are all our own. I can't make decisions for others. If you want to come, you may need to drive your own car. Hearing Will's words, Paul smiled. He is the current leader of this team. According to him, these people were originally put together, so it doesn't matter if some people are added. This is not a problem. I don't think you can leave today. Why don't you wait until tomorrow morning? It takes about half an hour to drive from here to the nearest Winthrop. Hearing Paul's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. In fact, he is not used to squeezing with others. Letting them drive by themselves is a good choice. Then it doesn't matter. I'll go and talk to the others. Give me your phone number, we will decide later. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul also said. Although he felt that it didn't matter, he still needed to ask others. As the two exchanged phone numbers, this matter was settled. At this time, Jiang Hai's helicopter was full of fuel. After saying that they would contact each other, Jiang Hai and others took the helicopter and left. As for these people, after filling the fuel, they drove to the town of Winthrop that Jiang Hai said. In the evening, Jiang Hai specifically called Paul, the leader of this team. On the phone, Paul had also asked the others. As he said, they were not familiar with each other, so they didn't mind joining Jiang Hai's team. The only requirement was that Jiang Hai drive by himself, which was naturally not a requirement. After agreeing to meet at 6:00 tomorrow morning, Jiang Hai also told the news to Fu Yuan, which made Fu Yuan very happy. Originally, Daliana and Marian also wanted to go, but considering that there were a lot of outsiders this time, if something happened, then Jiang Hai and the others would have a hard time carrying the two girls. Therefore, Daliana and Marian told them to wait for a while, and when the weather warmed up, they would bring them along. As for Belle Lester, after learning about this matter, he also asked Jiang Hai for a spot. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to take Belle because Belle was also very busy recently. But considering that there was already a helicopter in the manor, and most importantly, he didn't seem to be safe recently, Jiang Hai agreed to let him come with him. Of course, this was also his decision under the condition that it didn't affect the normal operation of the manor. Jiang Hai's manor now mainly had two major businesses. One was the ranch, which was also what Jiang Hai was most interested in. There were nearly 20,000 cows, each worth about $100,000, which added up to $2 billion. After deducting the tax and other expenses, he still had about $100,000 left. This was a huge sum of money, so he couldn't help but worry about it. The other business was fishing, but it was still in the stage of releasing fish food. After Jiang Hai came back, he had already called Iron Bull. They decided to start releasing fish seedlings one after another on March 11th. Because of this, the people on the ranch had been very busy recently, while the people on the farm were relatively idle. Whether it was the cowboys or the fishermen on Jiang Hai's side, their relationship was actually quite good. But if you were a cowboy doing the fisherman's work, the cowboy wouldn't do it, and the fisherman wouldn't do it either. So these days, apart from checking the growth rate of the seaweed and the growth rate of the bait in the area every day, the fishermen didn't have anything important to do. So more often, they would go to the manor to help with the planting of vegetables, but they couldn't get involved in the work of the cowboys. Naturally, robins wouldn't let them get involved. Even with the help of the cattle dogs and horses, it wasn't easy to let 20,000 cows go out to graze every day. So in general, the cowboys were very busy. And most importantly, they had to send one person to patrol the perimeter of the manor every day to see if there were any broken fences. So, Belle Lester had no time at all. But fortunately, Jiang Hai had just bought a helicopter recently. With the help of the helicopter, not only could they patrol the sea, but they could also patrol the perimeter of the ranch. Belle Lester had seen Marin Rupert's skills with his own eyes. Although it wasn't like the skills he learned on the battlefield, Marin Rupert's skills were very good. It wouldn't be a problem for him to patrol the perimeter while driving the helicopter to patrol the sea. It would allow him to squeeze out a day to go with Jiang Hai. Regarding Belle's decision, whether it was Robin's or Ai Dehua in the manor, they all agreed with him. Although they didn't want to admit it, the most powerful person in the manor was actually Belle Lester. With such a super bodyguard by his side, Jiang Hai's safety would be guaranteed, especially since Jiang Hai himself wasn't weak. After everything was decided, Jiang Hai and the others also went to sleep. The next day, Fu Yuan woke up at 4 o'clock and began to wash up. He also deliberately woke Jiang Hai up. Although he wanted to scold him for being crazy and go back to sleep, it was obvious that Fu Yuan wouldn't let him go so easily. So in the end, after struggling for 5 minutes, Jiang Hai reluctantly got out of bed. Looking at the moon and stars outside, he couldn't help but raise his middle finger at Fu Yuan. After washing up, Jiang Hai also went to the kitchen to make breakfast. After leaving a note for Delina and Marian, Jiang Hai carried his August semi-automatic rifle, Biyao, and the .50 Desert Eagle and left the room together. When he came out, it was only 5:40, and Belle was already riding a small car over. "Hey, boss, I thought we would have to wait for you." Compared to Jiang Hai's rifle and pistol, Belle's equipment was basically the same, an Uzi semi-automatic sniper rifle. The gun looked very beautiful, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai's gun license couldn't buy it. He also had a Beretta 92F, which was Belle's favorite gun. "We have an appointment, it's not good to be late. Let's go together." Looking at Belle, Jiang Hai smiled. Then the three of them got into an F-750 and drove out of the manor. They didn't wait for long at the manor's entrance before Paul called. After confirming the location, their motorcade appeared in front of Jiang Hai's manor in less than 3 minutes. Hey, Paul, over here. Seeing the arrival of the motorcade, Jiang Hai also stuck his head out of the driver's seat and waved at the motorcade over there. Seeing Jiang Hai's behemoth, Paul couldn't help but walk out of the driver's seat and scratch his head. Okay, everyone is here, let's go. After taking a look at Jiang Hai's car, Paul didn't say anything in the end. Instead, he waved at the people behind him, and everyone followed Jiang Hai's car to Alabama Mountain. As foreigners, they were obviously not as familiar with the terrain as Belle, so naturally, it was Jiang Hai who led the way in front. While the car was constantly moving on the highway, Belle was also telling Jiang Hai about the specific situation of the Alabama mountain. Speaking of the mountains in the United States, there were a lot of mountains, such as the famous Andes, Rocky Mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains, Taconic Mountains, Mount Everest, and so on. There were a lot of mountains in North America. However, there were only two famous mountains in the area, the Eastern Mountains and the Western Mountains. The Western Mountain Range was called the Cordillera, which was connected with the Rocky Mountains. It was 4,500 kilometers long, and was the longest in the United States. And the Eastern Mountain Range was the Appalachian Mountains, which was also the destination of Jiang Hai's team today. This mountain range was 3,200 kilometers long. Its starting point was Newfoundland and Labrador in neighboring Canada, and it went all the way south to central Alabama. It was a natural barrier in the eastern part of North America. Because of the colonization and development of the mainland, the most important and first 13 colonies established by the British colonists were in this mountain range. Therefore, the people of the United States had a special feeling for this mountain range. It was precisely because of this special relationship that the environment of this area was better protected. In the mountains, springs, streams, waterfalls, and rivers crisscrossed all over the Appalachian Mountains. Most of them were in the south. The mountains in Canada had too much snow, so it wasn't very fun. Compared to the mountains in Canada, the mountains in the United States were much more fun. It was also one of the favorite places for jungle adventure enthusiasts. There were a lot of fun things to do here. At the same time, the biological resources here were also very rich. In addition to a variety of unique plants in North America, the animal resources were also very rich. Chapter 208. We're here. After driving for about 3.5 hours, the originally cloudy sky had completely changed at this time. With Belle's skillful driving skills, Jiang Hai's car was the first to arrive at a parking space at the corner of the mountain. After him, the other cars also stopped there in succession. As the cars were parked, these people also got out of the car to stretch their bodies. After all, they had been driving for so long and were very tired. After stretching their bodies, they also took off their weapons. When they saw the weapons that these people took out, Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan's eyes widened. Including Jiang Hai's August, Switzerland's SIG, Germany's G3, France's FAMAs, of course, most of them were the national guns of the United States, the M16. In addition, there were many guns that Jiang Hai did not recognize. Of course, these guns were naturally the civilian version. Otherwise, they would have been caught for crossing provinces and regions. It could be said that Jiang Hai's eyes were blinded. Thinking of this, Fu Yuan immediately took out his mobile phone and began to take photos. Don't look at these people who are all big and tall, with beards or tattoos. But for Fu Yuan's request to take photos, they didn't refuse. Foreigners still like to show off. They will even match Fu Yuan's broken English and pose for him to take photos. Looking at Fu Yuan's shameful performance, Jiang Hai can't help but pat his forehead. Looking at Fu Yuan's embarrassing performance, Paul walked over with a smile and said to Jiang Hai, "Ha, your friends are really active. Jiang, check your guns, bullets, and equipment. We are going to enter the mountains soon." Yes, I know. In fact, there was no need for Jiang Hai to prepare. Belle, who was next to him, was almost ready. In fact, Paul just said one more sentence. He had already told the others. After everyone checked again, Paul gave the order and everyone lined up to enter the mountain. When they were leaving, Paul deliberately called Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan to his side. After all, they were newcomers. There were still many things that they needed to pay attention to. For example, they had to tighten their trousers. They absolutely could not let go, even if it was very hot. If you were bitten by an insect, don't slap the insect to death directly, because the insect's mouth could easily stick into your body and not be pulled out. This would cause infection and even threaten your life. You should know where you can go and where you can't go. Don't go near trees because there might be snakes and the like on the trees. Listening to Paul's words, Jiang Hai also expressed that he understood. He really did not think so much. But fortunately, Bell understood this. He also knew that his boss was a playboy. He would not go into the mountain often, so he only prepared these things, but did not explain them in detail. Hey, Paul, you like to talk too much. Do you see this guy? He didn't say anything because he was too lazy to talk to you. If I'm not wrong, that should be the team emblem of the Triangle State Army. Although the badge on it has now been removed, this also shows that this brother is from the Triangle State. Such a place is very exciting for us, but for him, it's his own backyard. Seeing Paul talking non-stop, Will, who was the first big guy to ask yesterday, couldn't help but say smugly. If Jiang Hai had not heard Paul say that this guy was actually a network engineer of an IT company, looking at him now carrying an M16A2 on his shoulder, he really looked more like a bandit than an engineer. Speaking of which, Will was also a soldier before, but it was many years ago, but he always remembered the Triangle State Army emblem. Oh, I'm not teaching Jiang Hai. Hearing Will's words, Paul could not help but smile a little awkwardly. It's okay, I really don't know about this. I only learned from Paul that there are so many things to pay attention to when going into the mountain. Seeing Paul's awkwardness, Jiang Hai immediately said. That's right, Jiang Hai. No, this should be the safest time. The snow on the mountain has almost melted, so it won't cause an avalanche. The temperature is still relatively low, most of the poisonous insects have not hatched, most of the poisonous snakes are also in a state of hibernation, and the bears have not woken up yet. Looking at the snow on the side of the road, Will slowly said to Jiang Hai. It's just that the animals now are too thin. At this moment, a big guy walking in front of Jiang Hai turned his head and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. It was just the beginning of spring, and the animals had been hiding for the whole winter. Naturally, most of the animals were hungry to the point that they were only skin and bones. You're not going to eat it, what's the use of saying that? Hearing this big guy's words, Paul retorted. In fact, in Europe and North America, foreigners almost never eat wild animals. In China, wild animals are endless delicacies, but in the eyes of these foreigners, they represent parasites and diseases. Indeed, animals living in the wild will more or less have some parasites on them, and it is indeed not safe to eat them. However, wild animals, because of year-round exercise, their meat is very thin, firm, and chewy. In addition, they eat natural plants, their meat is firm and tasty, and it doesn't have the taste of being raised. It is precisely because of this that wild animals are so popular in China. However, in the United States, people are more concerned about the parasites than the original taste of the food. For example, if you see wolves, bears, mountain lions, and American lions, don't kill them, we will shoot to scare them away. But if it's deer, pheasants, rabbits, and snakes, you can do whatever you want. Especially deer, no matter if it's white-tailed deer, reindeer, moose, or elk, you can kill them if you want. If you kill too many of them, you can just take out the bullets and throw them here. If it's a wild boar, you must kill it if possible. After joking, Paul continued to say to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. What is this situation? Is there such a saying that you must kill it? Although the United States is not as sparsely populated as Canada or Australia, most of the residents still live in towns and cities. In some suburban places, especially some pastures, deer and wild boars will seize the local resources. Because in the mountains and forests, top predators such as American lions, wolves, and mountain lions have almost become extinct. Only creatures such as coyotes and foxes are left. These guys can deal with rabbits and pheasants. They can't deal with deer and wild boars, so deer and wild boars, these two animals that can reproduce very quickly, are a lot in the mountains and will cause damage to the food chain. We do this with the special permission of the Environmental Protection Organization. Seeing the confusion in Jiang Hai's eyes, Paul also explained with a smile. As soon as he heard Paul's words, Jiang Hai's eyes were full of desire. He is originally a foodie who likes to eat wild animals. Now that he is told that he can eat and kill wild animals as he wants, what is there to be polite about? Right now, he was already trying to figure out how many things he could carry. This was a natural treasure trove. By the way, brother, if you go out to play in the future, it's best not to drive your pickup truck. It's better to get an off-road SUV than your car. No matter how good a pickup truck is, it is still a pickup truck. At the end of his words, Will deliberately turned his head and whispered to Jiang Hai. At first, when he heard his words, Jiang Hai didn't understand what was going on. He felt that his car was quite good. But then Bell's words made him understand. Westerners are sometimes very careless, but sometimes they are very particular, such as in the area of cars. What car should be used for what purpose? No matter how broken your car is, you must drive a sedan, otherwise, it is disrespectful to others. When going out for an outing, you must drive an MPV. Of course, if there are few people, you can drive a city SUV or a sedan. For a place like this, even if the SUV is bad, you must drive an SUV. Otherwise, it is easy to be disrespectful. In the United States, no matter how good a pickup truck is, it is still a pickup truck. It can only be used in the manner. It can be used as a means of transportation on the street, but it can't be used to participate in activities. In fact, there may be some confusion in saying this. It is like in China, if you spend 5 million to buy a tractor, you have to get a yellow card when you go out. This has nothing to do with the price. This is also why Paul was stunned when he saw Jiang Hai's car. Hearing Paul's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. It seems that he was really careless in the past. Thinking about it, he only picked up Fu Yuan, and Fu Yuan naturally didn't say so much, but he still has to be more careful in the future. Look, after Fu Yuan leaves, I should sell the gold coins. At that time, I can buy 2 cars, a sedan, an SUV, and an MPV. It will be more convenient to go out in the future. With this thought in mind, Jiang Hai and the others walked into the forest for more than an hour unknowingly. As the crowd walked through the outermost periphery of the forest and entered the mountain range, the first wild animals that came out were flocks of birds. However, no one touched these birds. Firstly, the people in the United States were not willing to eat birds. Chicken meat is another matter. These birds are not enough for them to clean up. Secondly, birds don't cause much damage to the environment, so they don't need to fight them. Looking at these birds, Jiang Hai also wanted to eat them. In fact, the Chinese have a tradition of eating birds for many years. For example, when Jiang Hai was young, his father often went to the forest near his house with some friends and used a net to catch birds. In the morning, they could catch dozens or even hundreds of birds. When they came back, they would use boiling water to remove the feathers, squeeze out the internal organs, and fry them. The taste was still very good. However, since the sparrow became a beneficial bird, Jiang Hai didn't seem to eat it anymore. It seems that the future is uncertain. Chapter 209. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking that there were really a lot of birds here and that it would probably taste good if he caught some back and fried them, the team, which was originally quite fast, suddenly slowed down. Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, Paul, who was beside him, gestured to him. While lowering his body, he whispered to him, "There's a situation ahead. Follow us. Try not to make any noise. Don't talk for now." Hearing Paul's words, Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan looked at each other. Then, the two of them quietly followed the group. After passing through a forest, the forest, which was originally filled with trees in Jiang Hai's eyes, suddenly opened up. A very long mountain stream appeared in front of Jiang Hai. The snow in the early spring flowed down the stream. Although the stream was not very wide, with the widest part being only about 1 or 2 meters wide, the current was very rapid. After all, the snow on this mountain melted very quickly after being baked by the sun. The water was constantly flowing, and in the stream, some fish would jump out of the water from time to time. Compared to the major rivers that had been occupied by Asian carp, most of the fish in this mountain stream were natives of North America. Jiang Hai could not recognize many of the fish, unlike the river next to Winthrop, which was basically filled with market fish. However, at this time, he was not in the mood to look at the fish. His gaze followed everyone's gaze and looked at the opposite side of the stream. At this time, on the opposite side of the stream, a small group of deer was drinking water leisurely. When some of the deer were drinking water, there would always be some deer standing there, looking around vigilantly. Although the deer in the United States were usually not hunted, it was different from the nearby Canada. There were really too few people in Canada. In some small towns, there were only a few dozen people in a small town. Under such circumstances, there was really no need to hunt these deer. Therefore, the deer in Canada were very happy. Basically, they would not be hunted by others, so Canadian deer were not afraid of people. On the other hand, the United States had a population of 300 million. Usually, there would always be some gun enthusiasts who would go into the mountains to hunt. Therefore, although there were a lot of deer here, they were much more vigilant than the deer in Canada. "It's a deer, do you want to kill one?" Looking at the herd of deer in front of him, Jiang Hai's eyes suddenly lit up. He gently nudged Paul with the tip of his elbow and said excitedly, "Speaking of which, his gun has never shot this kind of creature before." Looking at the deer in front of him, Paul thought for a moment and rejected Jiang Hai's proposal. "Forget it. These deer are too young. The oldest is only about 2 years old. They haven't grown up yet. It's too wasteful to kill them for meat." What else can a deer do if it doesn't eat meat? Hearing Paul's words, Jiang Hai was stunned and asked with some puzzlement. "Antlers." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul had already informed everyone not to kill this batch of deer. Since they didn't need to do anything, these people naturally didn't hide anymore and stood up directly. As soon as the deer on the other side saw the people on this side stand up, they suddenly exploded and fled in all directions. Obviously, they knew that these people were not to be trifled with. As for Paul, he explained. "Antlers? That's antlers? That's not right, the people here don't eat this thing." Hearing Paul's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head a little strangely. He had been here for a while, but the people in the United States really didn't trust Chinese medicine, so there were very few Chinese medicine shops in the United States. The antlers that are very valuable in China have no market here. "Boss, they want antlers for collection. Don't you see those movies? Don't many people like to hang a specimen of a deer head in their study? The number of antlers represents the age and strength of the deer." Hearing Jiang Hai's whisper, Belle couldn't help but explain with a smile. Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai also suddenly reacted. He really remembered, it seems like there is such a thing. "All right, it's already noon. Everyone, take a rest here. Let's start a fire and cook." Just when Jiang Hai understood the meaning of Paul's words, Paul had already walked to the side of the stream. Looking at the open space beside the stream and the clear water, he couldn't help but clap his hands, indicating that everyone shouldn't be in a hurry to leave. "Let's have lunch here first." As Paul's voice fell, everyone started to pack up. Obviously, these people weren't here for the first time, so they were very familiar with the division of labor. Some people picked up some firewood, some cleaned up the open space, and some people picked up some large stones and piled them up to make a stove for cooking later. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't do these things before, so he couldn't help. But fortunately, in addition to these people, there were also some people who needed to prepare ingredients. As the saying goes, those who rely on the mountain eat the mountain, those who rely on the water eat the water. Now that these people have just entered the mountain and haven't opened their business, naturally they can't eat game, so they can only eat fish. Immediately, 3 people walked to the river and took out the prepared fishing rods, fishing lines, and fishing hooks, ready to fish. He was not good at other things, but when it came to fishing, especially river fish, Jiang Hai was very confident. "Let me help." He put down his backpack and walked to the person who walked in front of them. This person also spoke a few words with Jiang Hai, so he was somewhat familiar with him. Except for him, Will, and Paul, Jiang Hai didn't speak to anyone else. "What? You know how to fish?" Looking at Jiang Hai, this person obviously didn't believe that Jiang Hai, who looked very thin and weak. "Of course, I'm a little fishing expert from where I come from. Just give me a fishing line and a few hooks." Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile and say. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person couldn't help but laugh. A fishing line and a few fish feces are not a problem, so he immediately gave Jiang Hai a roll of fishing line and a set of new hooks. Jiang Hai didn't refuse. After all, these things were originally worthless. For the people who came here to play, these things might not be worth a few bullets. Waving his hand, Jiang Hai led Fu Yuan and Bell upstream for a while. During this time, he has been observing the situation of the stream, and not long after, he chose a place. The water in this place is very calm, and the water is different from other places, it's a little muddy. There is a saying, when the water is too clear, there will be no fish. Although this saying is not very accurate, it is not without reason. At least when the water is too clear, there won't be any big fish. Of course, the sea is different. Secondly, in places where the water is more turbulent, it is not easy for fish to take the bait. This is inevitable. Jiang Hai has fished for a winter, so he is very familiar with the habits of freshwater fish. After putting the hook on the fishing line, Jiang Hai tested it. Although there is no fishing rod and it is not easy to throw, the stream is very narrow. For Jiang Hai, it doesn't matter if there is no fishing rod or if he floats. After studying the location, Jiang Hai casually took out a piece of beef from his bag. He was afraid that he would be hungry at noon, so he specially brought it over. After cutting the beef into many pieces, he threw it into the water area he chose. Then, the beef spun and fell into the water. It turns out that the special grade A snowflake beef is not only eaten by people, but also by fish. As the beef entered the water, a few bubbles emerged from the water. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Then, he threw some more beef into the water, but this time, in addition to the beef, he also threw the hook with the beef. As the hook entered the water, in less than 10 seconds, Jiang Hai saw a sudden flash of red light in the muddy water. Then, he couldn't help but tighten the fishing line in his hand. If it were an ordinary person without some strength, this tightening of the line might have broken their hand, but who is Jiang Hai? His strength, which had reached the limits of a human being, was instantly pulled out of the water. A big silver fish about 40 centimeters long with a hooked mouth was pulled out of the water. Wow, so fast! Seeing that Jiang Hai had caught something so quickly, the 3 people who were standing in the distance and watching the fun couldn't help but be shocked. The person who had lent Jiang Hai the fishing line ran over to see Jiang Hai's catch. This is a sockeye salmon, a very good fish. I didn't expect you to be able to catch it with this thing. You are good. Looking at the big fish that was still struggling in the snow, the people here couldn't help but be stunned. They patted Jiang Hai excitedly. Sockeye salmon, also known as lake sockeye salmon or lake trout, was a very common freshwater fish along the coasts of America and Europe. It could be found as far north as the Arctic region and as far south as the tropics. It could grow up to 70 centimeters long and weigh up to 4 kilograms. It entered the sea in June and July every year and was considered a migratory fish. When it reached adulthood, it would return to its birth point to spawn. Before it reached adulthood, it would stay in freshwater waters. This sockeye salmon was obviously not a fully grown fish, which was why it had been caught by Jiang Hai. However, even if it hadn't reached adulthood, that didn't mean that Jiang Hai would let it go. It was already so big that it could be eaten. Ha ha! Lucky, lucky! Jiang Hai laughed when he heard the other party's words. As for Fu Yuan, he ran over to take photos again. He felt that his choice to come to Jiang Hai's place was really the wisest thing to do. Other things aside, the number of photos he could take to show off was already more than what he usually took in a year. He was already used to the group chats. As long as he appeared, the group chats would explode. This kind of feeling was awesome. Jiang Hai and the others had a total of 16 people, so one fish was definitely not enough to share. Even if the fish wasn't small, it still wasn't enough. Then, Jiang Hai picked another place and started cutting the beef in his hand. Chapter 210. Jiang Hai had nothing to say about using a pound of beef that was worth $400 a pound to fish, except that it was a waste of money. He was willing to do it, and no one could stop him. Besides, Belle and Fu Yuan, who knew Jiang Hai's background, wouldn't stop Jiang Hai, because Jiang Hai didn't have a lot of other things, but he did have a lot of beef. Just like before, Jiang Hai looked around and found a quiet body of water. Then, according to the method just now, he threw some ground beef into the water. The second time he fished, he pulled hard and caught a big fish. Well, to be exact, it should be a small fish. Although this fish was about half a meter long, it had just entered the mature stage. This fish was called a striped wolf bass, which was a kind of perch, but it was considered a more ferocious kind. It could grow up to 2 meters long and weighed between 4, 5 and 9 kilograms. Jiang Hai's striped wolf bass was only half a meter long and about 2 kilograms. Naturally, it was the small one. Jiang Hai then continued to fish. North American white bass, walleye, brown trout. In less than half an hour, Jiang Hai had already caught 6 or 7 fish, and all of them were big fish. Jiang Hai wasn't interested in ordinary aquatic fish that generally ate insects or aquatic plants, so the fish he caught were all big ones. When he brought these fish back to the camp was about to explode. Paul and the others didn't expect Jiang Hai to be such a good fisherman. His ability to catch fish was actually so good. At that moment, the feeling of estrangement between Jiang Hai and the others disappeared. Many people came over to pat Jiang Hai's arm or high-five Jiang Hai, which also showed that they approved of Jiang Hai's performance. Compared to Jiang Hai, the fishing trio only caught 4 fish. It had to be said that the results were still a lot worse. However, with these fish and the food that they originally brought, they were able to escape. Then, Jiang Hai and the others went to clean up the fish and came back to make a pot of fish soup. The remaining fish were sliced a few times, salted and roasted. Speaking of which, the Americans were really strange. They almost didn't eat wild animals because they were afraid of being infected by parasites. However, 95% of the fish they ate were wild and they weren't afraid of being infected. Like Jiang Hai's fish, they were very happy to eat them. As long as they didn't spit out bones, they were very willing to eat freshwater fish. The meal ended in a lively environment. After everyone rested for a while, they set off again at 1:00 in the afternoon. After putting out the fire and packing up, everyone walked into the forest again. There were really a lot of springs in this mountain range. After leaving the small stream, in less than half an hour, another mountain spring appeared in front of them. However, compared to the small stream before, this mountain spring was much bigger. The widest part was about 5 meters wide. It could already be described as a small stream. Water was the source of life. This was inevitable no matter where it was. People could go 7 days without eating, but if they didn't drink water for 3 days, they would die. Naturally, it was the same for animals. At the small stream just now, there were animals drinking water, let alone this big stream. Paul didn't need to remind them of this. When they got close to the water source, Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan lowered their voices. Even Fu Yuan couldn't help but put down his phone that had been constantly taking photos since they entered the mountain. As everyone gradually walked to the river, Jiang Hai also pushed aside a bush and looked over. With his eyesight, he could only see that at this time, there were many animals drinking water on both sides of the river. In addition to the white-tailed deer they saw at the beginning, there were many other deer, and even the elk he saw in the park before. In addition to this deer, there were many other creatures, such as the legendary crispy noodle snacks and raccoons. However, the raccoons in the real world were not as beautiful as the packaging bag. It turned out that the creature on the packaging bag was actually a red panda. Compared to the red panda, the raccoon was an out-and-out thief and villain. It stole things, broke into human settlements, hurt people, and so on. A series of things were inextricably linked to them. There was even news that it would hurt human babies. The reason why the two creatures were mistaken was mainly because whether it was the red panda or the raccoon, they had the habit of washing their food by the water before eating. It seemed that they belonged to the category of being healthier after washing. In addition to the raccoon, Jiang Hai also saw many foxes in the distance. Because the large carnivorous animals in North America were almost extinct, the position of the fox in the forest was a bit awkward at the moment. According to the estimation of the researchers, the largest carnivore in this forest was the bear. However, the bear was too stupid and too big of a target. Moreover, because it was omnivorous, it was not good at ambushing. Although it was not slow, in fact, most animals could run faster than it. At the same time, in the face of fish that was easier to catch, fruits that were easier to obtain, and honey, catching deer to eat was obviously not suitable. Therefore, in the diet of the bear, catching animals obviously did not make up for the loss. In addition to bears, because of the disappearance of mountain lions, North American lions, and North American gray wolves, the top predators of this generation have disappeared. The most powerful carnivorous animals are the fox and the coyote is called a wolf, but in fact, it is not much bigger than the Wuxia dog. For deer, wild boar, and so on, the fox and the coyote are just food. They can't outrun them, and they can't beat them. If you chase them, they will give you face and run 2 steps to get rid of you. If you don't give them face, they will turn around and kick you. Because of this, the position of the fox is really awkward. Just like now, the deer occupy the best area to drink water, and the fox, as a carnivore, is hiding far away to drink water. The scene is really not harmonious. Not bad this time, Jiang, which one do you like? Looking at the herd of deer in front of him, Paul licked his lips. This time, it wasn't just one herd of deer, but many herds. They had just seen 3 herds of white-tailed deer, 2 herds of reindeer, 2 herds of moose, and 1 herd of elk. Perhaps it was because Jiang Hai had helped them solve the biggest food problem at noon, so Paul asked him first. Hearing Paul's words, Jiang Hai also observed the herd of deer in front of him. At a glance, he took a fancy to a moose. It is not because the antlers are big enough, but because the deer is fat enough. Compared to taking some antlers back to decorate, Jiang Hai is more looking forward to tasting the deer. He hasn't eaten venison yet. I want that one. Looking at Jiang Hai's finger, Paul can't help but be a little surprised. He originally thought that Jiang Hai would choose the deer king of the white-tailed deer, or the biggest one among the elk, but he didn't expect him to choose a moose. Okay. Generally speaking, people in North America didn't know how to hunt moose, because this kind of moose itself was very ugly, and its antlers were even uglier. If you said it was a deer, it would be better to say it was a horse. It looked like a horse with horns, very ugly. However, since Jiang Hai said that he wants this one, Paul can't say anything. He just told Jiang Hai to aim first, and then shoot together after the distribution. Otherwise, the animals on the opposite side will be scared away. Then Paul went to ask the others about their targets. These people are not here for the first time, so they naturally know the rules of hunting. Although there are a lot of deer in this mountain area, if you want to hunt deer, you have to follow the principle of hitting the big one, not the small one, and hitting the male but not the female. Deer are also social animals. A deer king enjoys a few, or even a dozen, mates. Killing a deer king will not cause a devastating blow to the herd, because a new deer king will soon appear. On the contrary, killing a female deer will be a bigger blow. It is precisely because of this that these people chose adult deer. Not long after, everyone had divided their deer. They also took out their weapons and aimed at the opposite group of deer. 1, Si, Roy, Phi. After everyone indicated that they are ready, Paul also whispered in a low voice. As soon as he gave the order to open fire, there were a few uneven gunshots in an instant, shooting straight through this patch of grass. Although the gunshots were a little uneven, the sound of the bullets only happened within a fraction of a second. The deer's reaction speed is not fast, but it is difficult for them to run away from the bullets. Following the gunshots, the herd of deer on the bank of the stream is very unlucky. 13 majestic male deer almost immediately tilted their bodies and fell into a pool of blood. When they heard the gunshots, the other creatures and the remaining deer have no time or mind to care about the deer kings that have fallen into a pool of blood. They all ran into the forest behind them, leaving only the mournful cries of the male deer. Some people with good marksmanship died a little bit more. When they fell to the ground, they were already dead. But there were always some rookies like Jiang Hai. Although they also hit the deer's body and made it fall to the ground, unable to escape, they didn't kill it in one shot. Heavy breaths came out from the nostrils of the deer, and the cries of the deer echoed in the forest. Listening to the deer's cries, Jiang Hai can't bear it. It is said that crying children get food. Looking at these originally alive deer being shot down by his own gun, he also felt a little pity for these guys. However, as soon as this thought appeared, it was suppressed by him. This world is unfair to begin with. The so-called fairness in the human world is fine, but in the natural world, it is just humans maliciously destroying the balance. Humans use their cheap sympathy to destroy the laws of survival in this world. It is that simple. Jiang Hai is not a saint, so the discomfort in his heart disappeared in an instant. He quickly put his gun on his back and followed Paul and the others to the river. Now is the time to share the loot. Chapter 2:11. Ha ha ha, my luck is really good, the harvest is quite good. Looking at the big deer lying on the riverbank, Will immediately yelled, and the blood flowing out of these deer dyed the river red. After smelling the blood, the fish in the river couldn't help but come out and greedily suck the blood. What should I do now? Seeing that the deer he hunted was not completely dead, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head. He looked at Belle with some doubt. Now that everyone was cleaning up their own deer, only Belle had the time to pay attention to him. Add a shot or a stab. Here is the deer's heart, and here is the deer's lungs. If these two places are hit, the deer will die quickly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also squatted down and took out his tactical knife casually. Seeing his movements, Jiang Hai also squatted down carefully. He has to admit that what Belle learned before is not only useful for humans, but also for animals. Under Belle's guidance, Jiang Hai quickly found the position of the moose's heart. As Jiang Hai's dagger sank into the moose's heart, the next second, the moose that was still gasping for breath officially died, ending its life. After all, in the manor, Jiang Hai also saw robins and the others killing cows. For killing this moose, he didn't feel as uncomfortable as he imagined. In the past, as an otaku, Jiang Hai naturally read a lot of novels. Whenever a newbie kills, it is inevitable that he will feel nauseous, and so on. But when it comes to him, he doesn't seem to have such a feeling. Jiang Hai didn't know if his line was too thick, or if his kill rate was too low. After all, there were many people who wanted to vomit after killing people. Jiang Hai only killed cows and deer, but Jiang Hai didn't want to kill people. Cut off the head of this deer. After going back, you can go to the outdoor goods store in the town and spend some money to ask them to make a specimen for you. Then you can hang it in your room. As for the meat and internal organs inside, it depends on your thoughts. If you want to keep it, keep it. If you don't want to keep it here, those foxes and coyotes will come out and eat these things. They are natural scavengers. Watching Jiang Hai kill the deer, Paul also came over. In his hand, there was a huge male white-tailed deer. This is his harvest. As the organizer of this hunt, he naturally has the right to choose. Hey! You don't want this deer meat? Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. One must know that as a pure foodie, Jiang Hai naturally knew that venison was a really good thing. The taste of this thing is somewhat similar to donkey meat, but it is more delicious than donkey meat. It has more lean meat, delicious taste, less connective tissue, and chewy. It also contains rich protein, fat, inorganic salt, sugar, and certain vitamins. It is very conducive to the digestion and absorption of the human body. And according to the words of Chinese medicine, deer meat is very nourishing, very gentle, invigorating the spleen and qi, warming the kidney and strengthening the yang. Although deer meat can't be said to be expensive in China, it is definitely not something that ordinary people can easily afford to eat. Although the deer that is often eaten in China is sika deer, not like the moose, elk, and white-tailed deer that Jiang Hai is now hunting. But this is also a deer. Hearing Paul say that these things are just left here, Jiang Hai can't bear it. Yeah, generally speaking, we don't eat these things. Seeing Jiang Hai's shocked expression, Paul hesitated and said to Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. How about this, since you don't want these deer, fine, give them all to me. If you don't want them, I can pay for them. The people over there are already throwing the internal organs. Although Jiang Hai doesn't like to eat internal organs, deer meat and deer penis are good things. Pay for them? Oh, then it's not necessary, but if you want, I can give them to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul also said with a smile. With Jiang Hai's contribution in fishing at noon, they are still very willing to let these people give up the deer body that they don't want to eat. After hearing Paul's words, the people who have finished cleaning up the deer head looked at each other and then expressed that it's okay to give it to Jiang Hai because in their view, these deer are really worthless, even the deer penis is the same. Thank you so much, everyone. How about this, I can't take these deer for free. I have some beef produced in my manor, I will use this beef to exchange for them. Seeing that everyone happily agreed and even prepared to help Jiang Hai get these deer out, Jiang Hai is also a little embarrassed. Suddenly, he remembered that when he came out, he was afraid that he would have to eat lunch and dinner outside, so he specially brought 20 pounds of beef. This can be considered as a precaution. At noon, he used almost half a caddy of beef to fish, now he has 19 pounds left, this is a lot easier. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people here didn't care. Originally, it was just a small effort, now it's not bad to exchange for some beef. However, when Paul took the first piece of beef handed over by Jiang Hai, the smile on his face froze. This is snowflake beef. Looking at the steak covered with fine lines in the vacuum package, Paul was a little stunned, and the other people who took the beef were also a little confused. At first, they didn't notice this. However, after Paul's reminder, they saw that this beef seems to be really powerful. In China, the common people eat more pork, even if because of some ethnic or religious relationship, some people eat beef and mutton, but in fact, most people don't know much about beef. There are even many people who only distinguish beef, sirloin, and tendon, and they don't know much about the names of beef, eye meat, cucumber strips, and so on. It was only in recent years that some beef supermarkets and large supermarkets had introduced this way of calling it. The beef is clearly divided into several parts to be supplied to the customers. Different uses naturally lead to different places. But even so, in fact, the price of beef is not much different. In terms of the label of beef, compared to the Americans, who have been demanding quality of life for a long time, there is a big gap. The Americans may not have eaten snowflake beef before, but at least they have seen it before. In some steakhouses or some large supermarkets, there will be a special freezer to store this kind of beef. First, it is to advertise, and second, it is to sell. These people are idle enough to take a few days off to hunt and practice guns at this time. This proves that these people are not short of money, so many of them have eaten the special grade A snowflake beef. When Jiang Hai took it out just now, they didn't notice it, but when they saw it now, they were stunned. This beef is too expensive. We are exchanging it with deer. You are at a disadvantage. Although the Americans are not very particular about this, to be honest, they also feel that it is not worth it for Jiang Hai to exchange such a piece of beef for the deer behind him. After all, deer are really worthless in the United States. There are forests in the periphery of every city. If you want to eat it, you can just go into the mountains and hunt one. Even in terms of money, the price of a whole deer will not exceed $600, let alone a deer with its head cut off. It is already good enough to be worth $200, but this beef is clearly marked. In New York, the retail price of Jiang Hai's beef is more than $400 in the top Western restaurants. Even if you use your connections and ask someone to buy it from the meat association, it will not be less than $330. In exchange for this deer, Jiang Hai is at a disadvantage. It's okay, this is the beef produced in my manor. It doesn't count as the price outside. As long as you like it, it's fine. Besides, you have to help me get the deer down. Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. He really doesn't take this beef too seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone here happily raised their thumbs. They feel that it is worth it to exchange a piece of beef with an inedible deer. I don't want the internal organs, but I want the whip. You don't have to peel off the skin, I can go back and do it myself. After the crowd received the beef, Jiang Hai said to the crowd. As the saying goes, if you eat someone's food, your mouth will be soft. These people ate Jiang Hai's food at noon, and now they took Jiang Hai's food. Naturally, they didn't care about Jiang Hai's small request. They immediately cut open the belly of the deer and threw out all the internal organs. As for the deer meat and the whip that Jiang Hai specifically asked for, they deliberately kept them. As for the internal organs, they directly threw them here or into the stream. They didn't have to worry about destroying the water quality because there were a lot of fish in the stream. These things were the best delicacies for them. After everything was almost cleaned up, the dozen or so headless deer piled up there was really a bit scary. Well, it's almost time for us to go. While they were cleaning up the deer, the sun was gradually setting. These people didn't plan to spend the night in the mountains, so Paul looked at the sky and clapped his hands, indicating that everyone was ready to leave. Although these people drove for 3 days to get here and only played in the mountains for 1 day, they all felt that they had a lot of fun. The most important thing was that they had achieved their purpose of coming here. They had shot guns and hunted deer. What could be happier than this? So everyone packed up in 2s and 3s. They pulled the deer that they wanted to help Jiang Hai bring down the mountain and prepared to return. However, at this time, a rustling sound passed into everyone's ears. Jiang Hai and the others looked up and found that not far from the stream, a huge wild boar had appeared upstream. Its long fangs and fierce eyes swept over Jiang Hai and the others. The originally not warm weather seemed to have dropped a few degrees when the wild boar swept its gaze over Jiang Hai and the others. Chapter 212. Damn, wild boar, it's really a wild boar. Looking at the wild boar confronting the crowd in the distance, Fu Yuan couldn't help but whisper. At the same time, he also took out his mobile phone. Needless to say, he was ready to take photos. Is this wild boar here to drink water? Looking at the wild boar in front of him, Jiang Hai asked in a low voice. It doesn't look like it. It may be attracted by the bloody smell of these internal organs. It is estimated that there are many animals staring at these internal organs nearby at this time, but these animals don't dare to come out. After all, there are so many of us and we all have guns. Only this idiot dares to come out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Will, standing next to Jiang Hai, also explained in a low voice. Pigs are omnivorous animals, which means that they eat everything: grass, bark, grass roots, fruits, etc. Anything that can be eaten, they will eat it. Of course, this includes meat. Just like those who raise pigs in the countryside, they will pay attention to what animals are hungry, but they can't starve the pigs. Because once pigs are hungry, they will find something to eat by themselves. Chickens, ducks, and so on in the family are the pig's dinner. There are even cases of pigs attacking children. Domestic pigs are like this, let alone wild boars. In the wild, it is common for wild boars to eat snakes, bird eggs, frogs, and so on. Not to mention birds, pheasants and the like are also part of its menu, but as Will said, animals are not stupid. Animals were not stupid. Although the smell of blood here was very strong, even lions and tigers would not come over when they saw such a large group of people with guns on their backs. Moreover, there were no lions or tigers here. At most, there were some foxes and coyotes. Naturally, they would not dare to be arrogant in front of humans. If they came out, who would be responsible for getting shot? But this wild boar obviously didn't put people in its eyes, so it swaggered out. Then, what should we do now? Hearing Will's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help swallowing and asked in a low voice. Jiang Hai has eaten wild boar before, but this is the first time he has seen this wild boar. It was said that in the mountains, there had always been a ranking: 1 boar, 2 bears, and 3 tigers. The wild boar was the uncrowned king of the mountain forest. Even a tiger wouldn't necessarily have a good time if it encountered a wild boar. With such a big reputation, even Jiang Hai was a little nervous. What else can we do? Have you forgotten what Paul said? If we encounter a wild boar, we must kill it. When Will heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but smile. Just as he finished speaking, a crisp gunshot rang in Jiang Hai's ears. Then, he saw a wisp of smoke coming out of the muzzle of Paul's Israeli-made Galil. After that, the arrogant wild boar that was confronting these humans tilted its head and fell heavily to the ground. Let's go. Seeing that the wild boar was dead, Paul couldn't help but wave his hand. Then everyone acted as if they didn't see it and walked towards the other side of the stream. Only Jiang Hai and Fu Yuan looked at each other. That's it? Fu Yuan even turned on the video, preparing to film a battle between humans and wild boars. Unexpectedly, it was over just like that. Cough, don't you want this wild boar? Seeing that the crowd was about to leave, Jiang Hai couldn't help but run 2 steps forward. The wild boar is dead, but Jiang Hai is still very interested in wild boar meat. Although his steak is delicious, eating pork occasionally is also a good choice. The most important thing is that it is really not easy to buy good pork in the United States. No one eats this thing. You want it, okay, then it's yours. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul couldn't help but turn his head and look at the eager Jiang Hai. The corners of his mouth twitched unconsciously. In his opinion, Jiang Hai is definitely a rich man. Yesterday's helicopter, and today's F-750. Although this car is not very suitable for the current environment, even he has to admit that this car is indeed a very expensive and good car. At the same time, Jiang Hai gave away the steak with a completely undistressed look. In summary, Paul is sure that Jiang Hai should be a rich man, but this rich man's hobby is really strange. Not only does he want to eat venison that no one eats, but now he wants to eat pork too? But it doesn't matter. Anyway, if they don't eat it, leaving it here will only benefit the fox and coyotes. It's better to give it to Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He doesn't care what these people think, he wants to eat pork anyway. He immediately threw the deer in his hand to Belle. Then he ran over and carried the wild boars. There are 2 types of wild boars. One is the Asian wild boar, and the other is the European wild boar. The North American wild boar is the evolved version of the European wild boar. It may be similar to the mountain lions, crocodiles, and pumas in America. Compared to their distant relatives on other continents, they are one size smaller. This wild boar is the same. Its size is about 2/3 of the wild boar that Jiang Hai saw in Bing City Zoo. Including its nose, it is about 1 meter long. The weight was about 240 pounds, more than 100 kilograms, but not much more. Because of the mud on his body, 200 pounds of weight was not too heavy for the current Jiang Hai. So he dragged one of his hind legs and ran over to catch up with the rest of the group. After crossing 2 rivers, other people's deer got heavier and heavier, but Jiang Hai's wild boar was a lot lighter. Because of the rapid river, the mud on the wild boar's body was washed away. The water was much lighter than the mud. When everyone left the forest and returned to the mountain corner, it was already 5:00 in the afternoon. Everyone has completed their purpose of coming here, so the others were ready to leave Jiang Hai. Although these people came from different places, they all lived in the nearby states. So now they are going back to New York to stay for the night and then go home tomorrow. From here to New York, it is only about an hour and a half's drive. It is closer than Jiang Hai's home. And Jiang Hai has no intention of going with them. After all, it is still dangerous for him to be outside at night. Therefore, everyone helped to throw the deer into the back of Jiang Hai's pickup truck, and then they all took their leave. Jiang Hai, along with Biyao and Fu Yuan, drove his car and sped towards his manor. It took more than 3 hours to get there. First, it was because Belle had never been here before. It was a bit strange. Second, it was because he was following the team. It was not good to drive too fast. When he came back, he didn't need to worry so much. Along the way, Jiang Hai would also speed for a while on some roads without surveillance, which also made him rush back faster. At 7:30 in the evening, after just 2 hours, Jiang Hai and others returned to the manor. Seeing that their vehicles were fully loaded, the cowboys who had driven the cows back to the cowshed and the fishermen who had returned to their residences walked out. Looking at the headless deer and the big wild boar, they were a little stunned. "Boss, why did you bring these things back?" Watching Jiang Hai get out of the car, Robbins, who was standing by the car, couldn't help but ask. "Eat. Do you want to eat? If you want to eat, you can take a leg back." Hearing Robin's words, Jiang Hai also said excitedly. But when they heard Jiang Hai's words, Robbins and others subconsciously waved their hands. They really didn't like to eat this thing. We'll pass. Let's help the boss carry the things in." Looking at these people who didn't know how to enjoy it, Jiang Hai shrugged. It's good that they don't want to eat. He can save it. Under the command of Robbins and Ai Dehua, there were really too many men in Jiang Hai's manor. It didn't take long for them to carry the deer and the wild boar into Jiang Hai's freezer. But before entering the freezer, the necessary treatment still needed to be done. The internal organs of the deer had been emptied. Now they only needed to skin it, then take off the whip, and finally hang it up. As for the wild boar, it was a little troublesome. They had to bleed, remove the internal organs, and peel the skin. When everything was done, it was already past 9:00 in the evening. Jiang Hai and the other two casually took a bite and went to rest. Maybe it was because they had too much fun yesterday. Jiang Hai also slept in. When he and Fu Yuan got up, it was already past 10:00 in the morning. Today, they were going to be a little more gentle, so the two of them took Daliana and Marian to Winthrop to complete Fu Yuan's second purpose of coming here this time, shopping. Among a pile of makeup and clothes, the four of them ate Boston's local food in the Italian restaurant that Jiang Hai often went to in the town and returned home in the evening. Unknowingly, this was already the 4th day that Fu Yuan stayed with Jiang Hai. On the 5th day, they went to Jiang Hai's pasture to ride a horse. It was also the first time that Jiang Hai rode Little Xia. Little Xia's performance was still very good. When it walked, it was faster than an ordinary horse trotting. And when it ran, it was indeed a bit difficult to accept. A horse could run like 10,000 horses galloping. Can you understand what this means? Under the nourishment of Jiang Hai's blood, its bones were much stronger than the average Shire horse. So other Shire horses couldn't run, but it could run freely. But its bones were strengthened, which meant that its body was strengthened. When it ran, it was like an earthquake. It almost scared the herd, but it also scared Robbins and the others. But fortunately, it was a close call in the end, and the 5th day's journey was over. On the 6th day, Jiang Hai took Fu Yuan to the river in Winthrop Town to fish there. On the 7th day, Jiang Hai took Fu Yuan to Boston, although he had only been to this place once. Chapter 213. Fu Yuan looked up at the night sky and leaned against the sofa on the balcony on the 2nd floor of Jiang Hai's house. He held a beer in his hand and looked at the automatic barbecue machine spinning on the bonfire in front of him. He listened to the sizzling sound of the oil flowing down from the deer's thigh and smelled the smell that made his saliva secretion accelerate. Fu Yuan couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Phew, time really flies. Unknowingly, I've been here for a week. Tell me the truth, do you find me annoying? Oh, I'm really happy that you're here to play with me for a few more days. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai casually took out a dagger from the side, cut off a piece of meat from the spinning deer meat, and stuffed it into his mouth. Hey, kid, you really don't know how lucky you are. I feel that this week of mine is the fastest week of my life. I haven't had enough fun yet. Really haven't had enough fun. It's like when I was in school and the summer vacation was about to end. Fu Yuan shook his head and sighed again. Fu Yuan only took a total of 10 days of leave. Including a week, that was 12 days. In addition, he prepared for a day when he came. 1 day from Bingqing to the capital, 1 day from the capital to the US, and 1 day from the capital to the US. There were still 9 days left. Unknowingly, he had already played here for 7 days. Tomorrow was the 8th day. He had already booked a flight at noon. He was going to fly back to the capital from New York and then fly back to Bingqing from the capital so that he could rush to work the next Monday. Yeah, I'm used to my current life. If you want me to go back to my previous 9-to-5 life, I'm really not used to it. The fast-paced life seems to be getting farther and farther away from me. Jiang Hai took a sip of the beer in his glass and leaned against another sofa. He looked at the bright moonlight above his head and the stars beside the moonlight. This was his favorite thing to look at. Sigh, let's not talk about this anymore. I'm asking for a beating by discussing this with you. When I think about the life I'm going to live after I go back and compare it with your life, I'm reminded of what it means to compare people to die and goods to be thrown away. This is it. Casually stomping his foot, Fu Yuan couldn't help but sit up straight and said with a displeased expression. By the way, you can be considered a rich man now. Let's not talk about how much cash you have. Isn't your property here? You're not short. Although you're not as handsome as me, you're not ugly. Why are you still single? I won't make fun of your 2 daughters and that 8 soft little sister. Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan asked with a curious face. From his point of view, Jiang Hai could be considered to be rich now. In the country, he had a family worth tens of millions. Yet, he dared to go back and forth with luxury cars, villas, and beautiful women. How could Jiang Hai, a person with a net worth of billions, RMB, not be as good as these little rich kids? He was carefree and had a good quality of life. But how could he not have women? After staying here for so many days, Fu Yuan naturally saw Aphrodite, Dana, and the others. When Fu Yuan saw these beauties for the first time, he felt that his legs couldn't move. After these days of recuperation, these skinny girls who walked out of the police station seemed to have been reborn. They had healthy skin, delicate faces, and thin figures. After doing some farm work recently, they showed a special kind of healthy beauty. Especially because these girls had a special mentality towards Jiang Hai, they would always show some of their sexiness in front of Jiang Hai. Of course, to others, they were very indifferent. After all, their previous experience made it difficult for them to easily open their hearts and let others in. At this time, in the eyes of Aphrodite and the others, the only man who could walk into their hearts was Jiang Hai. Not only could he walk in, but he could also walk around. For this reason, Fu Yuan often used this to tease Jiang Hai. But after Jiang Hai talked about these girls' past, Fu Yuan would not joke about this. After all, it was not appropriate to joke about this. Rolling his eyes at Fu Yuan and ignoring the latter half of his sentence, Jiang Hai continued to say slowly, "I am a married man, you know nothing." When he said this, Qi Li's face seemed to appear in front of him. "Didn't you get a divorce?" Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Fu Yuan couldn't help but ask with some surprise. "We didn't get a divorce. The agreement was not signed by Qi Li, so now I am still married. If I want to go to court to sue her for divorce, I can directly divorce, but I want to give her half of it. I will accept half of it. I must get a divorce, but thinking about Delina and Marion, I have a headache. I can't get myself into the police station for a divorce." Rubbing his hair, Jiang Hai said somewhat speechlessly. It sounds very troublesome, but why do you have to get a divorce? Did Qi Li put that on you?" Seeing Jiang Hai's frown, Fu Yuan couldn't help but ask curiously. Directly giving Fu Yuan a middle finger, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say sternly, "F***ck off. In fact, it was a mistake for me to be with Qi Li." Slowly drinking a mouthful of wine, Jiang Hai let out a long breath, because at this time, he didn't know how to face the feelings between him and Qi Li. Speaking of which, Qi Li didn't owe him anything. When he needed money the most, Qi Li gave him 400,000 yuan, and the only purpose of his existence was to be Qi Li's shield. As the saying goes, take money to solve problems for others. Speaking of which, I was a toad that wanted to eat swan meat. Qi Li's family had already made it clear from the beginning. She asked me to deal with the people in the company and inherit the company logically, and I took the money I needed at that time to deal with my own affairs. Thinking of the things between himself and Qi Li, Jiang Hai took another sip of beer. Back then, I was too naive. I thought that after we got married, she would turn around and look at me. Maybe she would think that I had some redeeming qualities. Even if she really couldn't get along with me, she would tell me so that I could give up on her. But nothing happened. Ever since she left home on our wedding day, she never came back. She never looked at me again. At first, I would send her messages to prove my existence, but the people around her clearly didn't want me to exist. Sigh, as a man, even though I was at my lowest point, it still hurts to be slapped in the face like that. Facing Fu Yuan, this was the first time Jiang Hai talked about his failed marriage in front of his brothers. Indeed, after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan didn't know what to say. It was said that even an upright official couldn't solve a family dispute. This was indeed the case. From Qi Li's point of view, Qi Li didn't do anything wrong. She didn't have any feelings for Jiang Hai. She only asked him to deal with the people in the company. She didn't need to have anything to do with him. It was understandable that the two of them didn't know each other. It was normal for the people around her to despise him. Who asked him to take a woman's money? And from Jiang Hai's point of view, Jiang Hai didn't do anything wrong. He had already returned the 400,000 yuan. Anyway, he had helped this woman get the inheritance rights of the company. At this time, he didn't expect this woman to look back at him. He just wanted to leave and start a new life because he didn't want to be tied to this woman anymore. Originally, this matter wasn't too difficult to say since they didn't have any feelings for each other. If Qi Li felt that there was something she didn't need Jiang Hai to do, Jiang Hai would try his best to cooperate. Just like a few days ago, when he went home to see his mother-in-law, Jiang Hai really didn't want to say anything, but Jiang Hai still went. However, Qi Li was like this. She didn't say anything, and she didn't ask Jiang Hai to do anything. She just didn't sign. This was what made Jiang Hai the most angry. He felt that he was being played because he was very sure that Qi didn't sign because she liked him. There was only one possibility: Qi was playing with him. This was the reason why he exploded that night. But as for whether Qi thought so, Jiang Hai didn't know, and he didn't want to know, because it was enough for him to think so. You guys are so annoying. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan scratched his head with a headache. Then in this situation, what should we do? Looking at Jiang Hai's more annoyed look, Fu Yuan couldn't help but ask him. According to my lawyer, even if I have to give up half of my family property in divorce, in order to not go to jail, I have to find a person who agrees to marry me. Drinking a mouthful of beer, thinking of this solution, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel helpless. With your current condition, you can find a random person on the street and they will be willing to marry you. What are you worried about? When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan's eyes couldn't help but glare. Jiang Hai's words are wrong. Isn't it easy for him to get married? I've already had an inexplicable marriage. Getting married again, is it because I'm sick, or did you not take your medicine? Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at him with contempt. Such a marriage once was enough. Ugh, hee, that's true. Then you can only do as you see fit. Forget it, let's change the topic. You are too serious. By the way, where is the beef you said you would bring me? How is your preparation? When he heard Fu Yuan change the topic again, Jiang Hai also sat up straight. How else can it be? There is a lot in the cold storage downstairs. Take whatever you like. Take as much as you can. I have no problem with it. What the hell, you want me to take it back? Don't you know that it is cold? How can I pass the security check? This has nothing to do with me. I can't give you a box of beef, ha 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 ha. Chapter 214. Sigh, I'm not used to it being so cold all of a sudden. Rubbing his hair, Jiang Hai yawned and walked downstairs. Fu Yuan left yesterday. Before he left, he went to the duty-free shops and the tax refund shops in New York. Originally, he only stared at things like mobile phones, computers, and the like, but Jiang Hai didn't let him buy them. Even if he bought them, he would not be able to use them. Mobile phones are cheap in the US, even if he bought them directly. However, the problem was that American mobile phones couldn't be used in China. Firstly, it couldn't be connected to the internet because it wasn't connected to the internet. Secondly, the voltage of all electrical appliances was different. In China, it was 220 volts, but in America, it was 110 volts. I don't know if any of you still remember when you were young, there were some video game consoles from overseas. Those are the red and white games. When you play them in China, you need to install a transformer. That's why it's very troublesome. So, Jiang Hai directly told him that he can bring some makeup products and toys, but not mobile phones and electrical appliances. In the end, under Jiang Hai's suggestion, he bought a lot of American ginseng and maple syrup. These are actually North American specialties. After sending Fu Yuan off, Jiang Hai returned to his normal life. But now, he suddenly felt a little lonely. Maybe they heard Jiang Hai's voice and ran out to play early. Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai also came back from the dog hole specially left by Jiang Hai. They ran to Jiang Hai's side and rubbed their huge heads against his trousers. Jiang Hai casually patted their heads and went to the kitchen. He took out some food from the fridge and prepared breakfast for them. Now, he is not only preparing for himself, but also for Daliana and Marian. To be honest, Jiang Hai is not very concerned about his two daughters. After all, he has not been a father before. Moreover, fatherly love needs to be nurtured from a young age. Just these two girls, who were 13 years younger than him, stood beside him in a delicate and charming manner. It was also very difficult for him to position himself as a father. However, he would still do the things that he should do for the two girls, such as giving them some pocket money and preparing breakfast. Jiang Hai had been in the United States for a while, but to be honest, he didn't like the breakfast that the Americans usually ate. He didn't want to drink coffee when he saw it, and oatmeal wasn't his choice either. Therefore, when he made breakfast, he basically made breakfast in China. In the past, his favorite food in China was tofu pudding, roasted pork, egg burger, or wonton. Noodles were all good. If he was in a hurry, he would make a jianbing. The best food was naturally mixed grains. However, there wasn't much to eat here. He didn't know how to make tofu pudding or wontons. If he ate noodles, he wouldn't be able to eat them when Daliana and Marian woke up. Therefore, the food that Jiang Hai made can be stored for a while. Even if it gets cold, it can also be heated in the microwave. Today, Jiang Hai made an egg burger. He lit a torch and heated the concave iron plate that Robbins helped him to make. Then, he put some olive oil inside. Compared to soybean oil, peanut oil, corn oil, and rice oil, olive oil is the least fragrant. However, this oil is the best for the body. This is recognized by everyone. Therefore, Jiang Hai is now used to eating it. After putting the oil into these grooves, Jiang Hai also poured the batter that he had already prepared. He only poured about half of it. When the batter was slightly hard, he put in the beaten eggs and meat. Then, he poured the batter into another groove. Then, he put the egg burger that was almost baked into the groove and waited for it to be cooked. On top of the egg burger, he could brush some sauce and sprinkle some xiran and sesame seeds. The taste would be very good. In this manner, except for Jiang Hai, the other cowboys and fishermen felt that this was an obvious Chinese breakfast. It was good to eat it occasionally, but if they had to eat it every day, they would rather eat oatmeal. However, the 8 girls that Jiang Hai brought back, as well as Daliana and Marian, liked to eat it very much. First, it was convenient. Second, they almost didn't eat breakfast before. Now that they had something to eat, it was better than nothing. Therefore, they were not picky at all. This made Jiang Hai very happy. He could cultivate Daliana and Marian according to their preferences. However, compared to Jiang Hai, who liked to eat the garlic sauce that he brought back from China, they preferred ketchup. After roasting almost 8 egg castles, Jiang Hai left 4 of them and ate the remaining 4. At the same time, he took out a carton of milk from the fridge. He didn't heat it up, he just ate it with the egg castles. It didn't take long for him to finish all the food. After tidying up, he started to run around the manor. When he returned home, Delina and Marian had already woken up. After washing up, the 2 of them were eating something. After exchanging a simple hand gesture with them, Jiang Hai returned to his room and left with his diving suit. Yes, he was going to continue his work. A few days ago, he checked the money in his bank card. Including the interest of the past few months, there were still $47 million left in his bank card. After deducting the tax money, there was probably less than half of it left. He had to find a way to make money. Perhaps because he was too poor in the past, Jiang Hai didn't have the patience to wait until the cows were sold in April to make money. He had already planned to get the gold coins and sell them before releasing the fry in the next few days. Riding a small car, Jiang Hai soon arrived at the wharf. It was already past 8 o'clock in the morning. Since the arrival of the helicopter, the wharf was not as tense as before. After all, before the arrival of the helicopter, Jiang Hai's fishermen had to sail out to patrol, and it would take them a day to do so. But now that they had the helicopter, they could circle the sea in 2 hours if they flew slowly. They could circle the sea twice a day and still have plenty of time to go to the manor. It was much more convenient. "Boss, you're fishing for seafood again." Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson couldn't help but smile and say. He and Rabinsi were the only people in this manor who knew what Jiang Hai was doing at sea. Although they were also curious about where Jiang Hai got the gold coins, they knew that it was better for them not to get involved in this matter, so they wouldn't say much about what Jiang Hai was doing. Even if someone asked, they would just say that he was fishing for seafood. Yeah, do you have anything you want to eat? Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai said tacitly. I don't eat those things. If you have extra lobsters, you can bring us a few. Forget about the rest. When they remembered that Jiang Hai liked to eat sea cucumbers and abalones, Ai Dehua and the sailors behind him couldn't help but shrug. They didn't have any hobbies for these two things. Looking at their appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile and say that wild boars couldn't eat fine chaff, and then he went to sea. Although he hadn't been here for a while, Jiang Hai's sense of location was still good. Soon, he drove to the area near the coral reef. After changing into a washing suit in the cabin, Jiang Hai deliberately made a dummy on the ship. At this time, the dummy was lying in the cabin. This was to deal with Ai Dehua and the others who passed by on a plane. If they saw that he was missing, it would be troublesome. With a splash, Jiang Hai plunged into the water. Not long after he entered the water, his pet, Big Fool, swam quickly over. He hadn't seen him for a week and this guy seemed to have grown up a little. He patted him and then gave him a piece of beef he brought. Then, Jiang Hai took his tools and dived to the bottom of the sea. Looking at the reefs in front of him that he had dug out a lot of holes, Jiang Hai did not hesitate and continued to dig. Just as Jiang Hai was working hard to make money, in the South District of Boston, not far from him, there were also people talking about him. Boss, recently, the police patrol on our side has suddenly intensified. Many of our underlings have been arrested. The situation is not good. Also, the person in charge of keeping an eye on Jiang Hai said that this guy doesn't leave the manor at night. What should we do? In the South District of Boston, in a hotel called Sin City, a man with a mohawk hairstyle said helplessly to a man lying on the bed. And this man's hand was wantonly touching a woman beside him. This woman's body was red and her eyes were filled with tears, but she didn't dare to resist at all. Her trembling body and clenching teeth showed her unwillingness in her heart, but more than that, she was terrified. But this man didn't seem to see it, and even seemed to enjoy this feeling. It seems that this Wuxia is a bit interesting. I didn't expect that not only the Winthrop police would work so hard for him, but even Boston was affected. It seems that I underestimated him. The man touched his chin and muttered softly. As he exerted force with his right hand, the woman in his arms couldn't help but let out a soft moan. However, she immediately shut her mouth and didn't dare to make another sound. Then, he looked at the underling beside him and said coldly, "Pass down my order. It's better for us to behave ourselves for now. Ignore that Jiang Hai for now." Hearing this, the underling next to him could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. "Yes, boss. But aren't you going to avenge your brother?" "Avenge? TSK, I don't care if that guy dies or not. What I care more about is this $. Someone paid for his life, and I just did what I was told. Now, it looks like I'll have to raise the price." Chapter 2:15. Your gold coins are indeed George III gold coins. There is no problem. Not only do they contain gold, but they also have a certain collection value. I don't know how much you have. If the number is not small, our auction house can buy it all. Putting down the magnifying glass in his hand, the old man sitting opposite Jiang Hai nodded to the middle-aged man next to him. Seeing that the old man had nodded, the middle-aged man looked at Jiang Hai with a pair of spirited eyes and said with a serious face, "The number is not small." Looking at the old man's eyes, Jiang Hai smiled, picked up the teacup in front of him, and couldn't help but take a sip, but in fact, his heart was blooming with joy. As for Moses Adams sitting next to him, he also looked at his boss with some curiosity. He didn't expect this guy's luck to be so good. Today was the 5th day after Fu Yuan left. Jiang Hai dug out the last box of gold coins yesterday. Then he called Moses Adams. Of course, in addition to Moses Adams, He also called Philips's people. Although Philips had cheated Jiang Hai in the manner, Jiang Hai didn't have a way to sell the gold. Although he could directly melt the gold and sell it, Jiang Hai didn't have a way to sell it. But the price is not particularly high after all. The current gold price in the US is about $168 per ounce, which is about 28 grams per ounce. Jiang Hai has tested the gold content of these gold coins, although it is not as disgusting as 18K gold. But it is not particularly high. 15 grams of gold coins, the gold content is about 13.5, which is about 900 gold content. 2 gold coins added together are not even an ounce. Jiang Hai spent half the night sorting out all the gold coins, a total of 43,817. If he sold them only for gold, it would probably only be about 21,000 ounces. 3 or 4 million was the price. Jiang Hai was very unwilling. 3 or 4 million may seem like a lot to others, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, although it was not a drop in the bucket, it was not too tempting either. However, if these gold coins were sold as antiques, even if they were not very valuable antiques, according to Moses Adams' original price of $400 per piece, they would still be worth $16 or $17 million, which was 4 or 5 times the original price. After learning that Jiang Hai had a batch of gold coins that he needed to sell, Philips was also quite interested in it. After they sold the gem Jiang Hai sold to them, they made a lot of money. Now they are also looking forward to Jiang Hai creating more wealth for them. Early this morning, their New York office sent people over, 1 old man and 1 middle-aged man. The old man was responsible for the appraisal, and the middle-aged man was responsible for the business. On Jiang Hai's side, it was him and Moses Adams. When Moses Adams arrived, Jiang Hai gave him a rough idea of how many gold coins he had. Let's get straight to the point. I have 43,817 gold coins here, and I can guarantee that these gold coins are not from the ship, so there is no conflict of interest. Now, please name your price first. Seeing that Jiang Hai had already picked up his teacup, Moses Adams said directly. He was very confident in this kind of business. Hearing Moses Adams' words, the faces of the 2 people sent by Philips flashed a trace of unnaturalness. According to the principles of international salvage law, although a ship salvaged from the high seas or from a private fishery belongs to an individual, there are exceptions. For example, if a ship is salvaged from a warship, it still belongs to the country. Unless it can be proven that the ship salvaged is a merchant ship, then it will belong to the salvager. In the world's high seas, there were many shipwrecks, and many people relied on them to make a fortune. But the ships salvaged were worth at least $1 million, and at most hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars. How could the original country of these shipwrecks let go of such a fat piece of meat? Therefore, there were many disputes back and forth between salvage offices on the high seas. This was also a method that Philips had originally prepared to lower the price, but now that Moses Adams had taken the initiative to bring it up, they really couldn't say anything more. Of course, because Moses Adams was a lawyer, this clause had to be written into the contract. If there was a problem, it would be Jiang Hai's problem. Ahem, since Mr. Jiang Hai has a good working relationship with our company, let's first name a price and round it up. $10 million, and we'll take all the gold coins. What do you think, Mr. Jiang Hai? Now that Jiang Hai and the others had kicked the ball to them, the middle-aged man from Philips also tried to name a price. But as soon as Philips finished speaking, Jiang Hai said directly, "See the guest out." "Hey, Mr. Jiang, don't be so agitated. Let's talk things over." Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to stand up and send them away, the 2 men panicked a little. Although there were a lot of George III gold coins in the world, such a large amount of gold coins was really a lot. If these gold coins were brought to Europe, there would definitely be many people willing to spend money to buy one. But they didn't expect Jiang Hai to directly drive them away, which made them a little passive. "You also know that I've worked with your company before. I bought this manor for $280 million. You were the ones who scared me back then. Why would I spend $280 million on such a small place?" This is already the most expensive place in the United States, okay? If I want a ranch, I can go to Montana. I can buy one 100 times bigger than this for $280 million. If I want a fishing farm, I can go to Florida or New Mexico. I can buy one 1,000 times bigger than this. I can go to the Caribbean and buy an island, you know? For the same price, I can buy a manor in Los Angeles that's several times bigger than this. This is what you scammed me for. But I signed the contract, and I admit it. When I have a business, I think of you first. In the end, you gave me $10 million. Is this your price? You can go. Looking at the two men in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a look of disdain. The more they listened to Jiang Hai's words, the more embarrassed the two men's faces became. When the manor was sold to Jiang Hai, it was indeed a little high. Not a little, it was quite high. After all, this manor was sold to Phillips for $150 million. This was including the money he originally owed, which was the final sum of $150 million. But when it was sold to Jiang Hai, it was sold for $280 million, which was almost double the price. In fact, at most, the highest amount here was $280 million. If Jiang Hai knew a little at that time and found a lawyer first, the price might have been lower than $200 million. After being scammed once, these guys still dared to come again. What were they waiting for? Hee, Mr. Jiang Hai, you're a little agitated. After all, I wasn't the one who sold you the manor. How about this, in order to show my sincerity, how about $15 million? Looking at Jiang Hai, the middle-aged man immediately put on a smile and said politely. My client doesn't want to argue with you. Our price is $20 million. Seeing that Jiang Hai had regained control of his temper, Moses Adams glanced at him. The contract had been signed. The money for the manor was definitely not going to be returned, but he would not let go of this gold coin. $20 million? These gold coins are not worth this price. This price is equivalent to each gold coin being worth $456.44, and the retail price of this gold coin is only between $400 and $410 in the United States. After all, Mr. Jiang has a lot of gold coins. How about this? I'll make the decision. 400 gold coins per coin, $800. Seeing that Moses Adams seemed to know the business, the middle-aged man did not beat around the bush and gave a fair price. Indeed, such gold coins were only worth this price in the United States. After all, during the First War of Independence and the Second War of Independence, the British Army at that time used these gold coins to pay their salaries. Therefore, the number of these gold coins in Europe might not be particularly large because most of them were melted down and rebuilt, but there were a lot of them in the United States. In fact, this price had already reached the price that Jiang Hai and Moses Adams had in mind. However, a good lawyer would not show his trump card so quickly. He rearranged his clothes and looked at the two in front of him and said softly, $430 per coin. I think you won't buy these gold coins to sell in the United States, right? If you want to ship them back to Europe, I remember that the average transaction price of these gold coins in Europe is €410, which is $447. You can buy $17 with one gold coin. More than 40,000 gold coins don't need to be too troublesome to transport them back by plane. More than 40,000 gold coins can let you make $700,000. That's not bad. Hearing Moses Adams's words, the faces of the two men opposite him turned a little ugly. After the two whispered a few words together, the middle-aged man made up his mind again when he heard the old man's words. We have two final prices. One is, as you said, $430 per gold coin, but we need to sign a new agreement with Mr. Jiang Hai. I don't know how Mr. Jiang Hai has these treasures, and I don't want to explore the secrets inside, but if Mr. Jiang Hai has such treasures in the future, I hope Mr. Jiang Hai can sell them to our auction house first. If the price is not satisfactory, we can go to other auction companies. If Mr. Jiang Hai doesn't sign this agreement, our final price will be $415 per gold coin. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the middle-aged man said calmly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at him with some surprise. It seemed that these people were a little surprised that he had so many treasures, but it didn't matter if they were surprised. They couldn't figure out what was going on with him even if they racked their brains. Moreover, Jiang Hai was about to level up at this time. If he guessed correctly, it should be tomorrow. Chapter 216. Although Phillips was a very shameless business organization, the auction house, he still knew how to do proper business. At least they wouldn't play any tricks when they had a clear agreement. After Jiang Hai took out the gold coins, they carefully checked them. After confirming that there was no problem with all the gold coins, they called the headquarters to send an escort car over to take the money away. When the money was loaded into the car, Jiang Hai had already received the money. According to the price of $415 per gold coin, 43,817 gold coins would be $18,184,055 in total. Looking at the money in his account, Jiang Hai nodded gently. He and Phillips had a private deal this time. They had to trust each other. There was no other way. The taxes in the United States were too high and very expensive. Not only did they have to pay taxes to sell things, but they also had to pay taxes to buy things. Even if the thing was originally yours, you still had to pay taxes. If they really went through the auction house process, then Jiang Hai's 18 million would only be left with 12 million. At least a third of it would disappear from the face of the earth. Not to mention the auction house, they would suffer a great loss. So in the end, Jiang Hai chose a private deal. There were only 2 contracts, which saved him a lot of trouble. At the same time, in the end, Jiang Hai didn't sign the $430 contract. For him, he didn't have a good impression of Phillips. Most importantly, he wasn't an ordinary person. He could ignore the water pressure now, plus he had Big Idiot to protect him in the water. He might not be a tyrant in the water now, but sooner or later, he would be. At that time, if he got anything, he would have to show it to Phillips first. It was too dangerous. At the same time, if Phillips didn't want it and spread the news, then it would be difficult for him to make a move in the future. It would be easy for him to be targeted by the country or people that the thing originally belonged to. The loss would outweigh the gain. 1 gold coin was only $15, which was only a few $100,000 in total. Even if the money fell to the ground in a few months, he wouldn't, he would still pick it up. After all, who would complain about having too much money? However, he wouldn't feel bad if he didn't want the hundreds of thousands of dollars right now, because he had other plans. Don't you feel bad about throwing away hundreds of thousands of dollars? Looking at the 2 leaving with the motorcade, Moses Adams asked cautiously. He didn't know Jiang Hai, but his heart ached for him. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled. This is your legal fee this time. Well done. It's only a few $100,000. If I say that I can earn it back anytime, would you believe me? Looking at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai's fingers moved casually. Not long after, a text message came from Moses Adams's phone. Looking at the $1 million in his bank account, Moses Adams's hands trembled a little. He came here to help negotiate the price and look at the contract, and he was paid $1 million. Jiang Hai was really generous. Thank you, boss. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Moses Adams tried to maintain his state of mind and said to him with a smile. It's fine. Okay, I won't see you off. I'll bring you some beef. You can go back. Patting Moses Adams's arm, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Finally, after giving him 5 pounds of steak, Moses Adams drove away excitedly. Looking at his car, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think of Paul's words. Well, it looks like I'm going to buy a few cars. Since I've decided to live here, I'll definitely have to deal with the locals in the future. It's not good to always give people a feeling of impoliteness. Well, I've decided. After I level up, I'll buy a car. Clapping his hands, Jiang Hai also turned and walked into the house to prepare for his first level up. Because Jiang Hai had leveled up once before when he got the Dragon Balls. Although he didn't have any impression of it at that time, he remembered the time. He inexplicably fell to the ground and then inexplicably fainted for a whole day. Last time, it was good that he was at home by himself. Even if he slept for 3 days, no one would know. But this time, it was different. He had a big family and business here, so he had to be careful. So after he came back, he told Delina and Marian in advance that he was going to retreat for a few days. During these days, if he didn't leave the house by himself, they shouldn't enter his room. Of course, Ai Dehua and Luo Binsi also said that they thought that Jiang Hai was going to cultivate, but although Jiang Hai wasn't going to cultivate, he felt that it wasn't too far off. In the end, he specially called Clive. Ever since that incident last time, Jiang Hai called Clive the next day and told her that his manner might not be very peaceful recently. He told her not to come over for the next few days. Although Clive was still a little worried about Jiang Hai, after all, the two of them didn't have that kind of relationship. Therefore, other than sending some text messages at night, she didn't come. Jiang Hai should have told her that she was coming. As the time arranged by Jiang Hai approached, the night also fell and shrouded Jiang Hai's manner. Jiang Hai also took off his clothes and lay on the bed, ready to sleep. He hadn't slept so early in a long time. However, in order to welcome the level up, he must be in his best state. Unfortunately, he was thinking too much. Jiang Hai had been an easily excited person since he was young. In the past, when he was young, there would be a party the next day and a spring outing the next day. He would be in a state of excitement the whole night, not to mention that he could level up at any time. Jiang Hai almost didn't sleep that night. He would wake up from time to time and check the position of the scales on his body. Finally, the moment the rising sun shone into Jiang Hai's room, all the scales on Jiang Hai's python pattern instantly grew. The moment the last scale grew, Jiang Hai felt his eyes light up. The snake on his body seemed to come alive, bringing a whirlwind in the air and plunging straight into his sea of consciousness. As his vision blurred, in the next second, Jiang Hai had already fallen onto the bed with a thud and fell into a deep sleep. On the surface, Jiang Hai's eyes were tightly shut and his breathing was steady. There was nothing wrong with him. However, at this time, in Jiang Hai's sea of consciousness, an earth-shattering change had occurred. At this time, in Jiang Hai's sea of consciousness, only a scene of doomsday could be seen. Dark clouds gathered in the sky and the sea was constantly surging. Tsunamis, wind waves, and lightning intertwined to form a scene of doomsday collapse in this space. The chaos has yet to open and the world is in chaos. Vast and indistinct, no one can see it. Just as the entire space seemed to be about to collapse from this huge force, a deep voice suddenly floated over from the distant horizon. When this voice ended, the trembling of the entire space instantly calmed down. The dark clouds in the sky dispersed and the waves of the sea stopped. Finally, a huge golden dragon swooped down from the sky and reflected in the water. Jiang Hai's consciousness seemed to be reflected in this huge dragon's sea of consciousness at this time. He only saw the huge dragon stop on the surface of the water. As Jiang Hai's gaze fell, a creature with a camel's head, rabbit's eyes, a snake's neck, a snake's belly, scales like fish, claws like an eagle, palms like a tiger, and ears like a cow appeared in front of him. The only difference between this creature and the dragon was that the dragon had antlers, but this creature's antlers were 2 sharp points. They grew from the back of its head and were straight and short without any bifurcations. He deeply felt that he was this creature. Flood dragon. Unknowingly, a voice exploded in Jiang Hai's ears and this dragon-like creature instantly rushed towards Yun Shao. Jiang Hai's ears buzzed, but this word was deeply imprinted in his mind. Flood dragon. From today onwards, Jiang Hai transformed from a snake into a flood dragon. He was no longer a snake, but a flood dragon that was only 1 step away from becoming a dragon. As he confirmed this title in his heart, Jiang Hai opened his eyes in an instant. The room was still his room. The sun was still floating outside, but Jiang Hai felt that it was not the same day. Jiang Hai picked up the phone beside him and looked at it. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. Sure enough. Looking at the time on the phone, Jiang Hai's dream could not be said to be short. It had already been 3 days. Then he looked down and realized that his abdominal muscles were more distinct than before. In the past, he could only see them when he exerted force. Now, even without exerting force, he could clearly see the 8 pieces of abdominal muscles that looked like they had been chopped by knives and axes. However, unlike the tight muscles of Asians, Jiang Hai's muscles were not as scary as those of Europeans and Americans. Jiang Hai's muscles were 2 times bigger than those of Asians, but 1 time smaller than those of Europeans and Americans. In addition to being extremely strong and fierce, he did not look disgusting. At this time, there was a circle of black mud on his body. This was the impurities that had been discharged, but it was much less than the first time. Under the black impurities, Jiang Hai could vaguely see that a flood dragon was coiling on his body at this time. The original snake tattoo had become a flood dragon tattoo at this time. When the flood dragon scales were full, it should turn into a dragon. He did not know if it would really turn Jiang Hai into a dragon, but at this time, Jiang Hai had a clear message in his mind. The current him was much stronger than the him when he was a snake. If compared with force, he could beat 10 of his former self. His physical fitness was originally the limit of a human, but now it was twice the limit of a human. When he was underwater, although he would not be as flexible as a fish, at least he would not be worse than the average marine mammal. Especially in the water, there would be a significant increase in speed. The most important thing was that he finally did not have to bleed anymore. Chapter 217. In fact, Jiang Hai has always been very satisfied with his golden finger. Firstly, he doesn't plan to go into politics or business, and secondly, he doesn't plan to dominate the world. He just wants to live a leisurely life with delicious food and no worries. Moreover, it's best to have a few girls to accompany him. That's the best way to live. So now, except for the girls, Jiang Hai is quite satisfied with the rest. This Dragon Ball has brought him a huge manor, and at the same time, it has given him the ability to improve pastures and creatures. It allows him to eat delicious food every day that he didn't even dare to think about before. The only thing that makes him more annoyed is that he has to bleed from time to time. It turns out that bleeding is very bad for his character. If it weren't for the fact that he bleeds every day, the collection of this book might have increased by a few thousand. Without further ado, after Jiang Hai's level changed from snake to flood dragon this time, his strength once again ushered in an explosive increase. He can speed up in the water, and his body's strength has become twice the limit of a human. In addition, his greatest ability is that he doesn't have to bleed anymore. As long as his blood comes into contact with an object, he can use his ability to inject the power in his scales into the other party's body. It's no longer like before, where he bleeds and drops 3 scales. This time, he can decide how many scales he drops. 1 scale is fine, 3 scales is fine, even 10 scales is fine. And with the different number of scales he drops, the spiritual energy he injects into the other party's body will naturally be different. At the same time, the energy contained in the scales will increase again. Not to mention that 1 scale can replace 5 scales, but 1 scale can replace 3 scales without a problem. It's not difficult to go up to the 5th floor. At the same time, the feeling of a flood dragon is much clearer than that of a snake. Jiang Hai can already feel it clearly. The spiritual energy contained in these scales is also beneficial to humans. 1 scale can bring a person back to life. Of course, this is a bit exaggerated, but as long as there is still a breath, Jiang Hai can use the spiritual energy of 1 scale to save this person. This is true. The spiritual energy contained in the scales could instantly dispel all the intractable diseases in the human body. As long as a person absorbed one piece of spiritual energy, they would be able to return to their most healthy state. As for 2 pieces of scales, they would be able to unlock their potential. This is also what Jiang Hai is most interested in, because it seems that the problem of Delina and the others can be solved. At the same time, Jiang Hai also knows that he used to gain 8 scales every day, not because his manner can only give him 8 scales. It's because in the case of a snake, 8 scales is already the limit. But in these 3 days, when he fainted, the scales on his body have increased from 0 to 36 scales in an instant. In other words, this time, Jiang Hai can gain 12 scales every day. Most importantly, Jiang Hai feels that he hasn't reached the limit yet. And this limit doesn't need to wait too long. After a while, when the millions of fish arrive, Jiang Hai will know how many scales he can gain. But after becoming a flood dragon, Jiang Hai's tattoo, which was originally the same size, has increased from 1,080 scales to 1,620 scales because of the 4 claws. Given the current situation, it's estimated that it will take at least a year for him to evolve to the next stage. Standing under the shower, Jiang Hai took a shower while sorting out his new ability. As his body was cleaned again, he finally controlled all his abilities. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Hai changed into a clean set of clothes and opened the door. As Jiang Hai's door opened, he heard 2 barks. 3 days ago, little white, little yellow, little yellow, little white, 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 little white and little white rushed upstairs at once. Well, I'm fine. Didn't you see that I'm out? Rubbing the heads of the little girls in front of him, Jiang Hai raised his head and said to Daliana and Marian. But as soon as his voice fell, the 2 girls ran over frantically. One on the left and one on the right, they hugged Jiang Hai in an instant. Bean-sized teardrops silently slid down from their eyes and fell on Jiang Hai's clothes. Feeling the feelings of the 2 girls, Jiang Hai's hands paused for a moment before he hugged them back. In fact, since Jiang Hai decided to take in the 2 girls, the relationship between the 3 of them had been somewhat contradictory. This didn't mean that the 3 of them didn't have a good relationship with each other, because the 3 of them didn't have any feelings at all. Delina and Marian didn't treat Jiang Hai as their father, and Jiang Hai didn't treat them as his daughters. Compared to the relationship between father and daughter, the 3 of them were more like relatives. Jiang Hai would give them some pocket money and make breakfast for them, and they would also clean the villa in exchange for these. The 3 of them rarely communicated with each other and rarely spoke. They didn't even have time to meet each other. Therefore, the relationship between the 3 of them was somewhat awkward. This could be seen when Jiang Hai returned to Bing City. The 2 girls weren't attached to Jiang Hai. They were used to being independent. However, in the past 3 days, the 2 girls were really worried about Jiang Hai. Because Jiang Hai had gone to the country, they at least knew what Jiang Hai had gone to do. But Jiang Hai had locked himself in his room for 3 days. If it wasn't for Jiang Hai telling them that they weren't allowed to enter his room, they might have already broken in. They were really afraid that something would happen to Jiang Hai. Firstly, if something happened to Jiang Hai, they would have to go back to the orphanage. Secondly, they were really worried about Jiang Hai. They were worried that something would happen to him. Feeling the hearts of the 2 girls, Jiang Hai, who originally had a little bit of guilt in his heart, felt a little more comforted. About 5 minutes later, Jiang Hai felt that the 2 girls' trembling bodies had gradually calmed down. He slowly said in their ears, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. But this time, I have a surprise for you." Hearing that Jiang Hai had a surprise, the 2 girls straightened their bodies and wiped their tears. Their tear-stained faces and red eyes looked at Jiang Hai pitifully. After a while, Marian gestured, "We don't want any gifts, but you can't do this in the future." Looking at the meaning of her little hand gestures, Jiang Hai could not help but smile a little awkwardly. This was really not something he could control. After all, he was going to level up. This time, he had received so many benefits. He was looking forward to the next level. Therefore, he could only change the topic. This time, I might have a way to make you talk. Looking at the two girls in front of him, Jiang Hai said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls were dumbfounded. They looked at each other. The disbelief in their eyes was almost engraved on their faces. Looking at the two girls, Jiang Hai smiled. This matter was indeed a little against science, but he was really confident. If it was said that he only had a vague feeling during the first stage, then he was very confident in the second stage. However, he wasn't at ease to use it on Delina and Marion. But he could let Aphrodite and the others try it first. If it was really useful, then perhaps it could create a miracle. Send a message to Aphrodite and tell her that I'm treating her to dinner. Tell her to come over tonight. Looking at the two girls who were still a little bewildered, Jiang Hai patted their heads and took the lead to go downstairs. He naturally had to inform Luo Binci and Ai Dehua about his return this time. They didn't have to worry about the boss. As for the matter of contacting Aphrodite, he left it to the two girls. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina and Marion also nodded. They were also very curious. They really wanted to talk. They weren't like Aphrodite and Marion who had already accepted their fate. They wanted to hear their own voices and also wanted to speak to Jiang Hai personally. Looking at Jiang Hai's confident look, the little flame in their hearts couldn't help but burn a little more. At that moment, they didn't think much about it. They took out their mobile phones and called Aphrodite. Aphrodite, who picked up the phone, was working in the vegetable field at this time. Because the wine manor hasn't been established yet, Jiang Hai hasn't gone to find a winemaker yet. Naturally, they haven't decided what grapes to plant this year. There are a lot of things to pay attention to when making wine. The grapes planted are also divided into red grapes and white grapes. Among them, there are more than 100 types of red grapes. Some of the more familiar ones are Cabernet Sauvignon, Carignan, Chiquel, Pinot Noir, Merlot, and so on. Therefore, without a winemaker's confirmation, Jiang Hai didn't know what to plant. Therefore, the girls who were originally planning to plant grapes were now mainly responsible for taking care of the vegetables that had sprouted and were growing. Although she was doing farm work, Aphrodite's complexion was a lot better than before. She was just a little tanned. She used sign language to gesture that Jiang Hai would treat her to dinner tonight. However, Aphrodite was shocked. After confirming, she turned off her phone and ran home to prepare. As mentioned before, these girls had a good impression of Jiang Hai. After all, Jiang Hai saved them from a fire pit. Therefore, they allowed Jiang Hai to have any thoughts about them. But the problem was that Jiang Hai didn't. Aphrodite now thought that Jiang Hai finally had feelings for her. She immediately went back to prepare. If she knew that Jiang Hai only wanted to use her as an experiment, she would probably be very happy. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.